Dude,
Hey, did I pull that off?
you look smooth as hell.
All right, I need.
Tell me how you did it.
Oh, it was amazing. When we'll discuss that when we get on here.
Yeah.
Let me turn this landscape. Oh my gosh, I might have gotten this first time.
Oh, don't show off.
All right, and here comes the weird part. I need to I need to move my camera over. Oh damn, wrong one. One camera, two channels. Oh yeah. Let's see how that goes.
There was a video.
There's that. All right.
Hello, I see you.
Fantastic. That's not what I want you to see. All right. And actually, everybody can hear us.
Excellent.
Cool.
Would be the first time. I got my Kerbal mug, though.
Nice.
We all know that Jeff's actually pretty odd, right? He's behind the curtain. That's it.
Oh my gosh, yes.
The title still says Billy and Brady.
Whoa, I don't have NDI coming off of you right now.
Oh, maybe I don't exist.
Crumbs. How did I do that?
Oh, for Skype?
I think I changed my Skype settings.
So, switched it to the non-NDI mode.
Ah, shoot. Oh, there we go.
I exist.
That's better.
You happier?
Now it sees you.
Okay.
All right, one down.
Saw a little switch.
Oh, yeah, there's that. All right. Now, for some reason, we're going to get my camera here. No. There's a funny bit with the camera.
I finally got the recorder broadcast warning, so it's finally my end noticed you in NDI.
Terrific. I am zoomed in way too much. There we go. All right, let's do this. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I think. Yeah, here we go. There we go, and we're back. Oh my gosh, Richard.
Hey, man.
I can't believe I pulled that off.
You got to explain it to me. I'm not even sure how you did it.
Okay, so
It looks so seamless.
so seamless. Yeah, just the way we planned it. Oh my gosh.
As usual.
So, okay, for those of you that are just tuning in, just joining us, welcome to Dev Intersection. My name is Jeff Fritz, and my co-host over on that side, there he is, Richard
Hey.
Campbell. So here's what I did, and this is kind of crazy.
Okay.
I ran my show this morning on, and that's the wrong title. We need to change the title on the channel. I ran my show this morning on my channel using my travel rig to run OBS, but I pushed all the video from my machine, from my normal rig, right, using my video capture card into that OBS on the travel rig. So I was still developing and working on my normal machine. I was just using my laptop to transmit, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So I literally had 2 OBSs running, and I just transferred from one to the other.
Nice.
That's
pretty clever.
Kind of messed up. Well, you're the one who said, hey, why don't you use the travel rig also? And it's like, oh,
yeah.
That's a great idea, because I've got 2 rigs.
Yeah, no, you got 2 rigs. Somebody's complaining my levels are too low. Do you want to bump it up, or you want me to bump it up?
I can bump up. Here we go.
Okay.
Try again.
I'm still talking.
There we go.
I was curious watching your stream to see if you were actually using Studio 2019 because, shipped.
Visual Studio 2019. It's a thing now. Oh my gosh.
Thing. Well, it's been a thing for a while. It's hard to tell when you actually ship software anymore. You guys just kind of have launches every so often now, but it's been around for a while.
It has been. There's definitely something to be said about the continuous integration, continuous deployment mentality and methodology. And as Microsoft moves more and more open source, right, the deployment and the availability of everything just being out there and available, right? It's like, there's new stuff. Here it is. Here's the latest update.
Well, and it becomes so much less painful, right? That you're not having. I mean, I miss the big bang deployments because it used to be a huge party and it was a huge deal. And if you think about it, because I've been doing this a long time, I used to do road trips off the back of studio launches. Like Carl and I would hop in an RV and drive across the United States talking about a new version of Studio. We think we did that 3 or 4 times.
Okay,
but it's not the same. I think environmentally, it's hard to justify driving a 40-foot RV across the country just to talk about tech when streaming works so well now.
It does.
Right. And it's also not the same kind of bangs. And I think that's good. I almost wonder if we're maturing as an industry. It's weird.
It's interesting. It's compelling that we don't need the big bang, right? Yeah. We've released how many versions of Windows and there hasn't been a launch event?
Well, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just
it's hard to even decide how many versions of Windows, and not all of them have gone well.
No,
but there's so many of them that in proportion, it's like they've gone pretty well. I got a patch last night. My machines are all rebooted this morning.
Isn't that something?
And you don't know if it's a new version or just a patch, or like, how do you tell the difference? And it's a number increment.
As quality goes up, my expectation is, you know what? I don't need to worry about that anymore. I don't need to think about it.
Well, this is something I was talking. I recorded some run as yesterday because I also live in the IT world, and one of the conversations we were having is very much related to this, but just about how maybe operating systems are becoming plumbing.
I hope they are.
Well, I think it's a part of a maturing industry that we're just, and by that sense, we're no longer thinking about new features in it so much as we just expect it to work. That stability, reliability, performance are the main metrics. And I don't want to say that about Studio because there's lots of things that could be better in Studio. But when you talk about what's new in Studio 2019, you can't not first talk about startup time, speed of operation.
Yes. And the team that was working on that were so focused on what can we move to the background as we load your code.
Yeah.
You know?
Something Windows did too, right? Like Windows chems up a lot sooner because there's still stuff loading on the back end.
Yeah, right. And I think as we saw the maturing of our programming languages, of our frameworks, so that now asynchronous programming is a first-class citizen in C#, not in Visual Basic, but in C#, it makes it easier for folks to build those types of applications and embrace and use these more complex structures and threading that a lot of us wouldn't even consider.
No, it used to be voodoo.
Oh my gosh!
And now it's becoming just something you expect to be able to use. This certainly was a topic a few years ago on .NET Rocks. We were thinking about are we actually being held back as folks who've been in development for a long time? Because folks new to development are just embracing these features and running with it, where we're all slightly skittish because, like, I remember multi-threading. I still have the scars.
But when people start having discussions about their their battle wounds around development, I worry about them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's a whole debate about, are they scars or are they wisdom or are they cynicism, right? Are these scars actually holding you back?
And holding back is an interesting way to look at it, right? There's something to be said for the wisdom that we have as developers that have been around the block once or twice and have built the same thing again and again. But that helps us, right? That you've got then a toolkit of things. Oh, I've seen this before. Let me go and do. And it's not cynicism, right? It's wisdom. Yeah.
You want to call it wisdom? Okay.
I want to call it wisdom. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
The other side of Studio that I think is very interesting is pretty much since 2010, it's been such a seamless experience moving your projects from version to version.
Yes.
And how you actually work, which is cool in one sense and problematic in another sense, because if you don't choose to learn the new features, you just keep using Studio the way you have literally for 10 years.
And that's a very good point. The number of folks that I see that are using Visual Studio, that are using .NET code, and they're still programming with .NET 2.0 constructs.
Yeah.
They're not actually taking advantage of async or generics or link. President Not Sure comments here in the chat room. It's easy to do async wrong.
Sure. Well, and certainly at a minimum, get no benefit. Just make your code more complicated.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's not. You can't do it wrong the way we used to do it wrong, where you would blow Windows up or have your at worst or best have your process killed. At worst, take the machine out.
Yes,
it's pretty tough to take the machine out these days.
And I think that's, I hate to say it, that's testament to Windows and how they're a little bit more robust. The framework itself, it doesn't let you throw those kind of fatal errors that'll just kill your entire machine like you used to be able to do all the time with VB6.
Well, yeah, it was VB was supposed to protect us from that, right? It was C++ that was the great machine killer.
Oh my gosh.
But VB was supposed to be the safe way, and then we found ways to breach that. And I also understand the argument that we didn't have as much horsepower back then. So we were removing layers of abstraction. You were working much closer to the operating system because you needed to get adequate performance. And now we have so much horsepower that we can have these layers of protection where we can have a supervisor basically looking at a process and going, you're a little bit badly behaved. How about I go free up your memory for somebody who's not so badly behaved?
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for good garbage collectors. For some of the interesting things that we're seeing happen to make our machines a lot more intelligent, so we don't do stupid things.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering. This is my thought on 2019. Is this the version that really sets the platform for a lot more machine learning behaviors into our code?
Yes.
When I think about some of the Roslyn pieces, it feels like they positioned it. There's a little bit in there already, right? Yeah. A bit of the new smarts. But I think we're at the beginning of this sort of wave of the intelligence of the machine sort of watching what you're doing and helping you along.
The IntelliCode is just the tip of the iceberg, right? IntelliCode's that feature that takes IntelliSense and it shows you with a little star next to things that this is the preferred thing that we've seen a lot of folks use in this context. When you think about, there's a machine learning algorithm running in the background of Visual Studio that's recommending things to you like that.
Yep.
What's the next steps after that,
Well, the way I was thinking about it is I remember IntelliSense in 2002.
It's come a long way.
And so I'm wondering if IntelliCode is at 2002. And what is it going to be like 10 years from now? That we're just scratching the surface of this whole thing. And there's that whole debate about, well, maybe we just won't program anymore. The AI will do all these things. And like, I think we're seeing more of what will really happen, which is all of this tech surrounds us and accelerates our ability to provide value to our customers.
And absolutely, Digital Drummer Jay in the chat room similarly points out that they're trying Visual Studio 2019 without ReSharper. First time in almost 15 years. Feels like might be successful without ReSharper due to some of that built-in functionality. Yeah, where when Visual Studio levels up and gets some of this great functionality that makes us more productive, that means that the extension environment, right, the extension ecosystem can focus on building those other cool things that really bring value, make us tons more productive.
You sure you're not crushing them like a bug?
Well, they've got their own thing that they've been building, right?
Yeah.
The folks at JetBrains, they've been doing a great job building out Rider, and it's got its own features and capabilities that make it phenomenal. Right, it does really great stuff.
But it is an interesting challenge when you live in an ecosystem with all these different things, that features that you bring into Studio that may have appeared as plugins and optional parts in other sources, and how you balance that. And I know I'm just teasing you because you have to wear the blue badge, but I know that there's lots of conversations that go on, right?
Yes.
That you don't blindly go stomping across this landscape in this community. It's everybody's involved in a conversation.
I'm gonna put on a different badge here today, Richard, just to make sure that folks know. I'm gonna put on my Twitch badge. Here we go.
Yeah. Okay. You're gonna be the Twitch guy today.
Yeah, I'll be the Twitch guy today, not the Microsoft guy. See that? We'll let Kathleen be the Microsoft.
Oh
person.
Right. Yeah, we have another Microsoft person coming on today.
Cool guest today. Yeah.
Oh
absolutely.
yeah. I'm super excited about the lineup, and this is all we're getting closer to getting the entire schedule for DEVintersection together. And Kathleen has just been perfecting this "I will make you a better programmer" workshop she does.
She's been giving that for a long time, but you have to kind of level up that workshop as the language and as the tools improve.
Yeah. Well, and also as she learns how to teach developers. Like I have the good fortune, have known her for years. We have these long conversations about those workshops each time she gives it, about how developers learn and what do you improve, and it relates back to this conversation you're just having about how you can use 2019 like you're using 2010.
Yeah,
that it is people who have been developing for a while and have gotten into patterns that are stale, that there are better ways to build things. The tooling has improved, and like, let me walk you through the new workflow.
Oh my gosh, yes,
it makes a difference.
It does. And when you take that now outside of Visual Studio and you look at the other editors that we can use with C# with .NET development, and you get into not just Rider but Visual Studio Code, there's another editor that has a very rich ecosystem. And I'm seeing the comments in the chat room here that the extensions for Visual Studio Code have absolutely made that editor. Whether it's .NET development, it's web development, it's JavaScript development that you're doing, you get all those really great features that the community and the ecosystem are building, and it makes it better for everybody. I don't know. Was it? Did I hear a horse?
I know you're a horse guy, so
I am.
Oh no, you're in a horse family.
I'm in a horse family. We've got a couple horses. It's a thing. It's a thing. They're not.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were rolling.
I was absolutely rolling. And then I got sidetracked. Stephen Vore says. Stephen Vore says I heard a horse. You did? I don't know where it could have come from. It's not here. They don't stay here at the house.
I would hope.
No, although
that's a big dog door.
Oh my gosh.
Shame.
No, I'm not going to let you get away with that one, sir.
All right.
Yes, the rim shot is what I should have played. You're right.
Yes.
I don't have enough Stream Decks to run this here today. I had 4 Stream Decks to run the Visual Studio launch at Studios, because for those of you that haven't seen Microsoft Studios, you've got just a camera in front of you. There's a machine there, and you're kind of controlling that machine. But at the same time, there's folks in another room with a giant switcher board that are controlling the video and sounds coming and going. And I have to control and be ready to interface with when they pass the camera to me so that I have a seamless handoff going back to them. So I had one Stream Deck that was just video switching so that when they handed off to me, I actually had the camera from Seth in studio ready to come up next to my camera that was in the room, because the folks on the switcher don't have my camera in the room accessible to them.
Right.
Oh my gosh!
And you were in Redmond for this?
I was in Redmond, and I made the mistake of giving our friend Beth Massey her own Stream Deck full of sound effects, so she could just hold me in my place.
You'd be a little unrestrained. You know, every time you get a new toy, you have to flap it around a little.
You do, as one does. Speaking of 4 Stream Decks, Hugo says, I need to have Beth as a co-streamer every day just for the sound effects. I don't know if that's a good idea.
Yeah. There's a very interesting balance between how many sound effects.
Yes. It was amazing. Okay. Ed Electric Havoc was saying Beth was perfect with it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, now we know.
All right. Sure.
She's got lots of experience.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So we've got a build event coming up here in May, right?
Yes.
We're T-minus 4 weeks from build.
And you're going to stream from build?
We're gonna see. We're gonna see what happens here. There's a couple of things afoot that we need to work out.
Right.
My plans have changed dramatically over the last week, so we gotta iron that out. And I gotta make sure that we don't anger the powers that be.
Oh no, don't do that. But I am putting together a group of podcasters coming to build, some that have never been to a Microsoft event ever before. You know, it's easy for us to do .NET Rocks and Run as Radio at Build, but well, you know, folks there are going to be watching the stream anyway. I'm keen to make new friends, you know, to reach out to larger and other communities.
Yeah.
And so actually, I've got Michael Kennedy, who does a Python podcast.
Really?
Well, there's a bunch of Python stuff in the Microsoft world these days, and so I thought it'd be fun to actually have folks that are specifically focused on Python and what that language is about, and the data science, analytics, all of the cool stuff that's going on inside of there. So that's a great grab. And also some AR and VR podcasts are coming.
That would be cool.
Yeah, it's really well, there's a new HoloLens.
Yeah, there
HoloLens
is.
to build for after how many years? The last time we saw a new piece of hardware at build for HoloLens, I think it was 2015.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, down in San Francisco.
Speaking of Python, can I recommend a Seattle area streamer to have come in and maybe write a little Python on stream? And you're gonna love the name. You can find her. She's amazing. She's on the Live Coders team with us. Check out Ninja Bunny 9000.
Well, you know, if you put a 9,000 at the end of anything, you make it better.
Well, I learned that from our friend Miguel Diacasa.
Right.
There's a numbering system at the end of these things. So Ninja Bunny 9000, she's in the Seattle area. It might be fun to have her come in and stream a little bit of Python. Don't have to pay for any travel.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a couple folks that we could invite in and might be able to do something with.
Well, and we do this time, you know, I usually have some recording booths. I have one dedicated streaming booth. So literally a booth designed, and I'm working with the AV team right now to pre-equip with the things that I think streamers are really going to want. Because talking to different streamers, including you, I've certainly hit on, they like using their own camera. Like they know their camera and they know how that rig works, but carrying big tripods suck.
It does.
So I figured getting a pro level tripod put into the room, and lighting, and a green screen.
Yeah, you didn't happen to see anybody struggle with a green screen last year at Build?
No. I was you know, those booths are busy, right? And you only had a little window to get set up. I think I got you 2 hours.
Yeah.
And you set up pretty fast, but it's a lot of moving parts to set up as like that.
Folks ask me about that travel rig that I carry around, and I carry 3 laptops. I had the green screen with me last year, and gosh, I even hooked the camera onto a chair and pointed it last year. I was like,
Yeah.
this isn't
So
gonna
that's when I'm
work.
thinking we need a tripod.
Yeah.
So yeah, tripod, lighting, green screen, room set correctly. So a place where you can sit in front of a table and have enough depth to set your cameras properly and so forth. It's just those are little things that make all the difference for that.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
That's going to be an amazing opportunity for those folks that are invited to stream there. Stelzy says, "Oh, the 8,999 Ninja Bunnies before her."
It's just like wondering what happened to preparation to A through G.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's so
Okay.
many of them. It's such a shame. We went through several preparations, A
Nice.
through G, and yeah, now we're on preparation H.
Throw me a frickin' bone here.
Yes,
All right, little on the nose. Just
little.
punched straight to it, no question.
There we go. So Visual Studio 2019 came out this week. We've got Build coming up. But
Yep.
if you can't get into Build, and of course, Build's going to be covering all kinds of things, not just .NET, not just developer stuff, right? There's also cloud things going on there. You mentioned AR, VR. But our show in June
Yes.
has actually more sessions for .NET developers because it's not just Microsoft folks. It's also
Right.
community folks, MVPs and the like. The workshops are always amazing. And you've got better access to some of these folks than you would at Build.
Oh, absolutely. One of the pieces is now together is we're going to be doing Angular Mix as part of DEVintersection. So and the focus specifically is Angular in the enterprise. And so Brad Green is going to be keynoting for us, talking
Cool.
about, if you're serious about Angular or you're trying to get Angular as part of the development practice inside your organization, I've got the Google team. I've got Stephen Fluen, I've got Brad Green, and then, of course, John Papa and Dan Wallin, who've been huge advocates of Angular all along. So there's literally a dedicated room running all 3 days focused purely on Angular.
Yeah. And so many folks are really committed and they love that framework. But even if you use other JavaScript frameworks like Vue, there's folks that'll be talking about Vue there, right?
Yeah, we've got some Vue, we've got some React. I think we've even got a React workshop going as well, because there is more than one right way to build JavaScript apps. It's not that big of a deal.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's a question of what you're comfortable with. It's interesting that Angular sort of switched over to this mode of being the enterprise way. I think there needs to be a critical mass. You need to get to a certain size, certain level of popularity where if you're an enterprise architect, and I've spent my time in that role, you're looking at a 10-year time horizon. Right? You're looking at, if we build this app, especially internal apps, it's going to be running for a long time. Am I going to be able to maintain it? Am I going to have folks who know how to use it and so forth? And Angular is one of those products that cross that line. They got over the point where you're like, okay, yeah, no, I should be able to find devs for this for an extended period of time.
The first 2 or 3 versions, they kind of stumbled into it, and folks they dealt with the migrations. But now they feel much more stable. We don't see as many significant changes from version to version.
Yeah, I think we're just seeing a maturing, which is, it's interesting to think. I mean, Angular started out as an internal thing at Google for several years. And it was as they were promoting it inside of Google as a development approach, it was a VP who came at them and said, well, listen, it isn't a real product if people outside of Google aren't using it. And so it really hadn't occurred to them that would be a thing to do. And then they started putting it out there. And like all good software and all good tooling, the community used it differently, and they came to appreciate that the model they were working in was not the optimal one. And you have that great 1.1 to 2 schism where it's like, we're going to change our thinking here.
Yeah.
And it made some people very unhappy. I almost look at it as like the VB6 to VB.NET jump.
Oh my gosh,
where,
yes.
The names may be the same, but the strategies were very different.
Yep.
And not everyone was happy about it. There's no two ways about that.
Yeah. In the chat room, Hugo asks, I presume there will be IoT at Build and/or DEVintersection. There will be IoT definitely at Build. And I heard from our friend Carrie Payette and Lino Tadros that there's an IoT workshop at DEVintersection.
Yes, there is. And there's also, IoT and cloud go hand in hand. So when you get down to that AI and cloud part of DEVintersection, there's all these references and interactions with how do we handle large streams of data and the management of the IoT space and the way we're actually using it. So yeah, if you've got particular concerns, there's some remarkable folks there. Carrie's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
Lino, and the fun thing about our show is the model is like you'll catch Lino and Carrie at lunch. If you want to talk extensively about your project, they're there. We all eat together.
Carrie's recently started streaming. She's another member of our live coders
Another one of your
group.
team, yeah.
So, we were already talking about having some streaming space there. Maybe we invite her to do a little streaming as well.
Yeah, no, we can make that work. I got the space for it.
Yeah.
It's the MGM Grand. Nope, that's the wrong show. The MGM Grand which is our fall show, they've doubled their conference space, so we're relaying the whole thing.
Oh
But
my
the Swan
gosh.
Dolphin, which there's a perk for you. I mean, not that I don't love Seattle, but hey, we're right on the Disney property. You can take a boat to Epcot if you want. But the Dolphin Conference Center there in the Swan Dolphin Complex has some good space for us to work in.
Oh, it certainly does. And, well, that actually the difference between the fall and spring shows. Orpheus in the chat room asks, has anyone been to fall and spring? Are there more vendors at spring than fall?
The fall show tends to be larger, for better or worse, right? And I don't know how I feel about this. It's been true for many, many years. I think part of it is sort of the timing of when you decide to buy. It's like folks coming back from summer vacation and things, you're sort of gearing up. They tend to think in terms of the fall. Where I see spring folks more on their almost government time, like they care about when their ends of fiscals and things are. And of course, the East Coast, West Coast thing, right?
Oh gosh, yes.
If you're living in New York, flying to Vegas is an all-day affair. Where popping down to Orlando, you could almost day trip if you want. Where on the West Coast, it's easier to get to Vegas. So you see a certain amount of that as well. We get more European attendees at the Orlando show. And I think it's because they get direct flights.
Well, is it a combination of direct flights and turn it into a little bit of vacation since you're coming to the land of the mouse?
I would hope so. I think that's got to be part of it. It's always an interesting balance when you're designing a conference, and I've done this for 25 years now. You don't want too nice a location. Like we tried to do shows in Hawaii for a while, years ago.
Yeah.
And too nice a location. Then it's like the dev can't go because his boss is going to go. So it's that kind of problem you get into. You don't want it to be too fun. And so I think our Orlando, Vegas, they strike a good balance there. There's a few other spots that we've looked at. I mean, I'd love to do New Orleans.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That's an interesting one. We did a few tech
1
ends
second.
there, I think.
Something happened and your camera is frozen.
Oh, no.
Can you try stopping and restarting it?
Try and stop and restart. I don't know how I would stop and restart my camera, but
Let's
see if I can.
Yeah, the camera button at the bottom.
Oh, yeah, I see. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's turn that off. And then we'll turn it back on.
There we go.
Ta-da!
The wonders of Skype.
Yeah, Skype loves you.
It occasionally.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a nice camera. It's a Canon XC10.
Ooh.
And then I'm using a Cam Link to punch it into USB 3.
Nice.
So it's 4K. Yeah, because I like a 4K webcam. I'm that kind of guy.
You know what? I have the Razer Kiyo here in front of me. It's got a nice ring light around it, and it does 1080p at 60 frames a second.
Nice. Yeah. I use the XC10 at 1080p 60.
Yeah.
It's the right mode for that. But I like the integrated ring light. That's the thing.
It is. Oh my gosh.
Just one less thing you need to deal with.
One less thing, and it definitely pops my image off from the green screen behind me.
Right.
Gives me that separation.
Yeah.
Have you tried turning? Yeah, Dwayne, we turned it off and turned it back on. Thanks.
My daughter rolled one of those out the other day. Actually, it was just yesterday. I was trying to ask Google to turn on the lights in the living room, and it wasn't responding.
Yes.
So and I'm like, what is wrong with that thing? And she looked at me and goes, have you tried turning it off and on again? And I'm like, really? This is what you've learned after all these years of hanging around with me? It worked.
My network went out in the house. We lost the network connection to the ISP a few weeks ago, and we couldn't turn the lights on and off in the house. We're talking to the hockey puck lady, to Alexa, and nothing's happening. Like, oh no! What do we do?
We're broken. The world is over.
Yeah.
I realize my daughters have lived with internet their entire lives. They've not, and the only time the internet doesn't work is when they haven't done their chores. And so I've literally, I have redundant internet connections in my house because, have you met me? And the one single point of failure was the telephone pole down the block from our place. And sure enough, a truck hit that pole, knocked out all the wires years ago. And the girls came downstairs and said, did we do something wrong? Are you mad at us? The internet doesn't work.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, that's the only reason, right? That's the only thing, the way that would happen.
So I always tell this story about utilities and dependability, reliability of them, where I was out at a Mexican restaurant on Cinco de Mayo for lunch. We sat down. They just brought out our drinks and set it down. All of a sudden, the power went out in the place.
No, wow.
It turns out the delivery guy who was delivering the food for the dinner rush crashed into the power line just outside the building and took out the power to the building. And the power company wasn't going to be out to fix it for another day.
Right. So they're just closed. You're done.
They're done. And they lost since they lost power, they lost all the food that they had in the freezer. They couldn't cook anything because they didn't have any power. Boom.
Yeah, I know. This is disaster for a restaurant. No two ways about it.
Folded up shop.
And actually, to answer Ulfias's question about vendors, which I think was the actual question. So in the fall show, it is a separated area. It will be different this fall that has all the vendors in it. So I think the number's pretty similar. It's just that they're concentrated in one spot in fall, and in the spring they're spread across the hallways. Because of the layout of the Swan, we don't have a single big room for that, and so the numbers are comparable. It's always a dozen to 20, depending on what's going on. Yeah. Different companies in different cycles where they have stuff they want to promote directly to developers will be there, and then other times they won't be. So we're never exactly certain what the numbers look like. But yeah, I think they're about the same size. They're just different styles. The spring show versus the fall show.
I feel like the spring show, we've got a little bit more. It's nice and warm outside. You've got the ability to have those outside parties, those outside get-togethers.
Yes.
And even if you just walk together down to the ESPN zone down the way. Right?
Yeah, for your dinner. Go to the sort of world walkway there with all the different food. But I love that we can have breakfast by the canal.
Right.
At the Swan, right? We eat outside. It's Florida, right? The afternoon lunch, it's sometimes inside, sometimes out. It depends on whether or not the thunderstorms are showing up. It is Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
And the thunderstorms show up like no fooling. It is the lightning capital, right? Like there's a reason. So yeah, they have to we make a judgment call every meal. If we can eat outside, we will. And if we don't trust the weather, then we'll pull them inside.
But when we have had the lunch outside as a conference, having a lunch outside, being able to see everybody and just relax in the Florida
sun. You get
sun.
that hit of this is what 1,000 people looks like, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a lot.
It's not in a stuffy conference dining hall.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like then conference food when you're eating outside like that. For some reason, it tastes different.
Well, and I also like providing the food flexibility. Hanselman's part of this. Like Hanselman's our opening keynote this year, and he's a Chipotle guy for a reason. He likes being able to pick and choose the things he eats. He's a diabetic, and so we make sure that our buffets always have that diversity. If you prefer to eat vegetarian, no problem. You prefer to eat paleo, no problem. Like we have all those choices.
And Ulfius is mentioning that Vegas was unusually cold last year. Well, so the Vegas Dev Intersection actually slid into December.
Yeah, so
that was part of it.
The sun's shining, it's not bad, but boy, it gets cold there at night. But you can't trust outdoor Vegas. It's either screaming hot or screaming cold. It's very tough to be outside.
But the only time I want to go outside in Vegas is when I'm walking to T-Mobile Arena to watch a Knights game.
Holy man. I ditched my Cirque du Soleil tickets to go to another Knights game.
Nice.
That's how good it was. And now I've been, because I'm Canadian, I'm required to go to hockey. It's kind of a rule. And I went to a Sharks game in San Jose a few months ago, And still hockey, so I was happy.
Sure.
But it just reminded me how much the Knights amp up a show. Holy man, it's at a different level.
There's, I mean, as attendees at that event, to be able to get tickets at the, I'm sorry, as attendees and speakers at the Fall Dev Intersection in Las Vegas, and to be able to get tickets to go see a Knights game was tremendous. It's walking distance.
And the stadiums are generally full, but there's usually pairs and singles you can get, right? Like there's a few tickets. The number of locals there, like I'm used to explaining hockey to people when I'm in the United States watching a hockey game, but now the number of locals that are there and love their team, yeah, I was blown away by it. It is one of the most amazing professional sports experiences I've ever had going to a Golden Knights game.
It's impressive. Now, to bring it back into tech, have you seen how the NHL is going to start putting sensors starting next season? They experimented at the All-Star game. They're going to start putting sensors in the pads and gear so they can monitor speed of the players and collisions and be able to keep track of better statistics of how the guys are skating around the ice and things. That's pretty impressive stuff there.
Well, and I think pro sports across the board, we're starting to deal with all of our athletes are bigger and stronger, but their brain cases are the same.
Yeah,
and concussions are serious business. There's been some really great in the NHL rules now. It's like I think you're allowed 3 major concussions, and then you're not allowed to play anymore.
And
it's saving lives,
scary.
right?
Yeah,
but
literally,
Brad Hulls was one of these great, amazing players, but he was concussion prone, and so career cut short to keep his brain intact. What are you going to do?
Here in Philly, Eric Lindros.
Yeah, Lindros, man,
amazing player, and concussions. If we had some of, I mean, and they're talking about these are little IoT chips.
Yeah,
that they're embedding in pads. You know,
do you remember when I think it was Fox Sports? They put a sensor into the puck.
Yes,
to help people follow the puck through the walls.
They're actually, Hugo mentions that here in the chat room. As long as they don't bring back the glowing puck.
Glowing puck. The glowing puck was weird, especially when it was in behind the boards, and so it would show you where it was in behind the boards. But when it showed the fireball around it, when somebody slapped it well, I loved that. I thought it was hilarious.
That was great. But what's funny is they're slowly bringing that back.
Yeah. I think it may have been ahead of its time. It might be actually more acceptable now. You're basically video gameizing pro sports.
We don't know anything about overlaying content, computer-generated graphics over video.
Who would do that? Nobody does. That's weird.
Why would you do such a thing?
I can imagine. It's all good stuff, and it's fun to be. We're seeing how all these things are evolving. Certainly, when we saw the Golden Knights, like. They use a lot of graphics. They light up the whole ice. Like they really go nuts. The fall. The other thing about the fall show was we had Connect at it last year.
Yes.
And so that changed our whole first day, and the stage was outrageous. Like I like a good stage, but boy, when Microsoft wants a stage a certain way and that team wants a certain way, they spent a lot of money on that stage, and it looked fantastic.
Oh my
gosh.
The
biggest screen I'd ever seen in my life. The whole back of that stage was a gigantic screen.
And then some of us who were speakers at the event were speaking in that venue on those giant screens because that was the room later in the week. And I'm like,
yeah, I got to keep that keynote room for the whole week. So we got to use that room.
All right. This is a thing.
Yeah. I think it's one of the distinctions in the fall show is that we have a chance at those kinds of special events. I can't say we're going to do Connect again. I'd love to. We had lots of positive feedback about it, but there's lots of logistics to making an event like that happen, and it's hard to decide how it's going to happen.
I didn't get to see much of the first day.
You were sequestered, right, streaming boy. Like you had your own stage, your own little studio there.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the videos from Connect, there was a live segment, a live day of Connect. We set up a studio, 2 studios, in fact, on the second floor of the venue, and it was I've never seen a mobile studio get set up and run so smoothly by the team we had there. It was amazing.
It was a local lighting guy that trimmed out all the lighting. I remember watching him work, and it's like I don't even know what you see, Like he's got different kinds of eyes than the rest of the mortal humans. But boy, when he was done, it looked amazing.
It was phenomenal. I've never looked so good in my life. At least that's what the wife tells me.
It was a wild day. But we definitely will work on some streaming for the spring show as well, and see what we can produce there.
Oh my gosh, this is. I love having the conversation with folks like you in the chat room, of course Richard over here. As we, ramble through here and discuss some of the great things that are happening in technology, and then we get to have guests on and chat with them, talk about all the cool things.
And for these first few, I've certainly wanted to focus on the workshops just because they've got the most to say. The session roster's coming together. We're gonna get at least one more of these in before the conference itself, and hopefully I can dig a little further into the sessions. But the lineup is huge this year, and we've got a real serious diversity sessions. Obviously, with 2019 out, all of the materials being updated to show off 2019 features and to talk about some of the new capabilities there. In the ongoing, it's really challenging on the AI side because things are moving so quickly. To produce a set of abstracts now, 2 months out, and then as time goes on, the features change. We're going to have to revise all that stuff coming into the show.
Yeah, that's kind of the danger of being right after build is. You got to react a little bit now.
But I like being a month after build because so much stuff hits you so fast at build. Those few weeks we get to digest. We get to think. I actually like the versions of talk. You take the talk you did at build, and a month later you know more, and you approach that talk differently.
There's something to be said for when folks go to an event, whether it's build, ignite, DEVintersection, what have you. You're going to learn something from it. You're going to go back to your office on Monday, and you're going to say, "Hey, check out what Fritz showed me," or Scott had this really cool thing. Let's try it with this. You're going to get in, you're going to try it out, you're going to use whatever technique, whatever new service, whatever new capability. And by Wednesday, you're going to go, that didn't quite work the way that I thought it would.
Right.
Or, it would be great if it also did this. And then you're going to have a question for the Damian Edwards, Scott Hanselman, right? Rich Lander, he's joining us, right? Alison Buchholz-Au, right? You're going to have a question. Gosh, I tried this and it didn't. And that's when you actually have your questions. It's not in person at the event. It's a few weeks later.
Yeah.
So to watch build online, that's pretty cool. You're going to get to see all the content. But then to be able to come and actually see some of those same speakers at DEVintersection and get those questions answered, because now they've heard some of that feedback. You're right. A lot more valuable.
They're thinking about the product differently already, right? That's always that impact of the community when you first announce things versus when you can actually take them out for a spin and start expanding the way you think about it.
Yeah, definitely. So much there that happens when we engage community. And we were having actually a discussion about the Linux community last night. Can I bring this up? Can we go into this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a crazy story, and I don't know. It doesn't necessarily fit with the conference per se because it's not an area that we're really diving into. Although the Angular guys are doing more in this, but you're talking about the Windows subsystem for Linux.
Yeah, but it's a good community story and how the community updates and reflects and can make a product better and can accept a product once they become involved. It isn't so much the functionality that's delivered is one thing. The packaging, how it's delivered, is another thing. But when a community is involved and they feel like they have a stake in it.
Yes, and they have influence over the product.
Yes.
I think what you're seeing, and what we're talking about that's weird about the Windows subsystem for Linux is that the code's part of Windows, so it's not actually open source. And yet the Windows subsystem for Linux group runs a GitHub repository that takes on issues and then discusses them and then incorporates those ideas into the product, which then shows up as a Windows Insider build. And so some of these cycle times are super short, a few weeks, where a good idea is presented, or a utilization of a feature in Linux is presented that they want to have access to through the bash prompt, and they'll go, yeah, we can make that work. They'll map it out. They'll get it coded, and it'll show up in an insider's build. And I think that's what there's something super powerful about. I had an idea. I put it through this user voice or GitHub issue, however you do that. The team picked it up, and then it was in a build a few weeks later. Sure, I had to go through some hoops to get to that build before it showed up in a main build, X months later, because we have a cycle. But you contributed to the product, even if you didn't write the code. It was part of your ideas, part of your debates. It was your screenshots that they argued over. Like, that's a very powerful mechanism. And I think it's what we're really getting out of this new community-driven culture, is using these tools so that there's rapid feedback that goes right to the dev who writes the code.
And this is something that it's not just community feedback, it's customer feedback. It's data-driven, right, development, right? You can analyze and see how a feature is going to impact the product. You can see the number of customers that it's going to impact. And then when we do things with continuous deployment to do A/B testing, now it gets really interesting, and you can actually get good feedback, right?
Yeah. And what? Well, plus I love the good instrumentation too. Is that you actually see what people are using, what they like. Like, what are if you think about what cloud, part of what's cloud done, we mentioned this in the IoT, it's like now I can simply instrument every instance of the app and look at everybody's utilization. There's always a danger when you're dealing with that highly engaged part, those influencer types, that they use the product differently, that they see the product differently. It's great to be able to instrument overall, and then to see, well, this is the things to use. And you've worked on Studio and the tooling for years, so I know kind of feedback you're getting, sort of comprehensive view of how the entire customer base uses the product. So you milled the features that actually impact a large group of people.
Electric Havoc is mentioning would be nice to see ext3, 4, etc. drive support natively. I don't know about changing the file system when you're working with Windows.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it brings me back to thinking about stuff like we were mapping to Linux via Samba into Windows as well. Maybe there's ways to mount those drives, even temporarily. They're still thinking very much in the terms of the bash prompt in WSL as a script execution tool. Like one of the mantras, and you can see this in one of the Channel 9 videos, was it's not enough that it looks and feels like Linux. It's that I can take a script that is only ever run on a dedicated Linux box and run it in a WSL without recompiling it, and it simply runs. Like, that's the metric they're after.
Yeah. And
so if you had a script that was mounting a volume, an ext3 volume, like the fact that it could do that, it doesn't seem out of realms. Not easy, but not out of realms.
There's third-party features that do it. Hard to make images for Raspberry Pi and edit the image. Yeah, I'd believe it. I haven't been down that path yet.
Especially when you start getting into this, I'm prepping a drive behavior, like to do drive prep for a Linux instance through WSL. I love it. That's pushing the line. That's definitely what that is.
From Windows, prepping Linux. Clearly, 2019 is the year of Linux on the desktop.
Yeah, I don't know about that. You know what I do know? I know that the Windows Store,
Go ahead,
has like 9 Linux distros in it.
Okay.
What weird land are we living in? That there are other operating systems living in the Windows Store.
You're making me remember the throwback to when I walked into a Comp USA in 1997 because I wanted to buy, not just download. I could download Red Hat Linux. I wanted to buy it, so they actually got paid for it.
Right.
But it was labeled, there was a sticker on it that said Linux for Windows.
What?
On the box. Yeah. Like,
what does that mean?
Thanks. You don't know what you're doing here, do you?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
DNet78 was using Kali OS from the store a few weeks back. That's impressive. I didn't know there was as many as 9 distributions out there. And they're not dependent on the Ubuntu Windows subsystem
No.
for Linux. They're actually compiling down to the binaries, right?
Yeah, and so there's different distros that WSL can run. Ubuntu was the original one. When they first did it in 2016, they worked with the Ubuntu folks. That was the first one that worked. But now there's several more. So whatever particular flavor you prefer, you can have a WSL implementation with that distro.
You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, no, and I don't know the reason why they picked Ubuntu. Maybe they were friendly, and they didn't think what they were proposing was completely insane.
Yeah,
only moderately
sure.
insane.
Well, there's something to be said for choosing a distribution that's broadly available. Folks are already using as developers on their desktops. There had to be some sort of interview data collection process to say, hey, what distribution are you using? You know?
Yeah, and to figure out what makes sense for folks, because there was this original energy, thinking back to the 2016 timeframe, about can I have a bash prompt? Can I run scripts that I've got written in Linux already? We're doing this interoption, to build .NET for on Linux as well. I'd like to do the prep work.
Oh yeah,
and I'd like to use the same command structure. I don't want to rewrite that stuff.
No.
So that's how it started. It's just grown from there. 3 years on, we're just seeing more and more capabilities and trying to understand, how far do we want to go? Like, what does this really look like?
And that agile thinking, right? That very Scrum, here, I'm only going to plan a few sprints out.
Mm-hmm.
That way of thinking leads to folks saying, well, what exactly is your roadmap on this? You know what? Customers are happy. We're going to keep tuning and making it better for them so they're happy about it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't think it's much more complicated than that, but it is a challenge to manage all of the things that people are asking them to do. And you look at the list. If you go to that, you put the link up to the GitHub repository for WSL. Like, they've gone through a huge number of issues, and there's still a few hundred open.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And there's more still being contributed, although it's calmed down.
Definitely.
I think the feature set has gotten sophisticated enough that for a lot of cases it just works.
Mm-hmm.
So the need to keep it's not going to twitch near as much as it had. No pun intended.
Yeah. Just looking here, I see only 2 bugs that were opened in the last 24 hours. Before that,
Right.
there were there were 3 of them 3 days ago. Yeah. It's slowed down significantly.
If you go look at issue number 1 in WSL, issue number 1 is, when is this code base going to be open sourced? And there's a great conversation through that, and it's all the way from back in 2016. And it ends with, we just see no point at which this will be open source. So it is a GitHub repository with great interaction and an evolving tool that people are engaged in, and there is exactly no source code there.
Yeah, look at that. 2016, April 6, 2016, will this be open source? And
I commend it to your reading. It's long because it was a long conversation, and I think they truly debated it. They'd have to do a bunch of weird licensing. Like, it's not impossible, but it ultimately came to this idea of why? Because you're never going to be able to build it. It integrates into the Windows kernel.
Yeah.
So they can give you that piece of code, but it is worthless to you. You can't write anything on it and test it. Like, there's just no point.
No.
Unless they're actually going to open source all the Windows. And I'm not even saying Microsoft is opposed to that idea, but from a legal perspective, from patents and ownership, when you talk about a code base that traces back 30 plus years, it'd be easier to rewrite it than open source the existing code base.
Yeah. Hugo asks, would this conversation have even happened at all, let alone publicly, under the old Microsoft? No. No way.
Well, and it's just, isn't it bizarre to even think about how they got here, that this was even be a possibility? Like, there were previous Unix interop implementations in the Windows Server world, right? Going back to POSIX and Unix services for Windows. But even that got retired out in the Vista timeframe, like 2006 or so. And then there was nothing for years until suddenly the WSL popped up. But yeah, it just, but I think this is, and it might have been the opening of our conversation today too. It's just this idea that maybe operating systems are just becoming plumbing. We only want them to work. They should play well, nice with each other.
They should.
And just be reliable. And this interoperability that we're now getting just means that, you can write your code on the platform you prefer, deploy your code on the platform you prefer, and they should all work and play well with each other.
Yes, oh my gosh. And it's not just my PC, it's also my phone, my tablet, all the devices, all the things.
Yeah. It's all of those different things. And we're still not doing as good a job of it as we could. But again, it's like your expectations around how software should work now have changed dramatically, really, since the smartphone took off. Like, the smartphone is what introduced the average mortal to sophisticated software they use every day.
Oh my gosh.
It's not at work. It's a personal device. And now your expectations of software are different. And that's a big deal for us as developers. That bar in the past 10 years has moved. When you were at work, you were way more tolerant. Now you're at home.
I don't build Battleship Gray applications anymore. It needs to look good. It needs to work on someone's phone. It's with websites too. It needs to be able to scale down, and we know that 50 to 60% of the folks that visit our websites are mobile.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, mobile has eaten the world effectively, just to paraphrase Andreessen. But that is, if you're consumer facing, mobile's got to be first. And I would argue that's still the weakest place of our development space.
I completely agree with you. The tolerance for mobile development tools that are not first class, that are not as resilient. The discussion about Visual Studio 2019.
Sure.
That you can't do some of these cool debugging things with it. You can't do time travel debugging. You can't do that level of interaction. That's a problem.
All these things are
Slows
hard.
You down.
But I think it's part of this is we are still struggling as developers to code on one kind of machine to deploy to a different kind of machine. Like, most of our development for a long time was the computer you code on is very similar to the computer that people consume it on, whether that's building web pages, building desktops, apps, so forth. But with mobile, suddenly it's like, you don't code on a phone. I don't really want to. So suddenly you have this dichotomy of it runs one way on one device, it runs a different way on a different device. And we try with emulators, but that cycle time is hard. It takes a long time to write some code and get it on the device and see what it looks like and then go back and tweak, right? We do that iterative cycle.
Yes.
And if you look, there's a reason there's a diversity of mobile development approaches, because none of them are great.
No.
They're at best good. But, you see fragmented markets like this when we don't have an ideal choice. If there was a great way, there was a right way, well, would we be using it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think about what WinForms did in the VB timeframe to building Windows applications. It consumed the market because it was so much better than every other approach. You just couldn't justify it all of a sudden. It vacuumed up the world. If there's a way to build mobile apps that's that pervasive, that'll be great. I don't see it yet. There's lots of people trying lots of things, and that's exciting. Like, it's fun, but it's fragmented for a reason. There's no one right way.
Absolutely. I think our first guest is about ready to go here.
Lovely.
I'm going to try and add. Here we go. Let's see if we can add in our friend Kathleen Dollard. Let's see how this goes. And I think here it comes.
Well, I went through a bonk there.
Hey, how you doing?
There we go. All right.
Here.
Yeah, awesome.
One second. We're getting you added into the mix here.
Okay.
And I don't have a camera from you yet.
Okay, Cameron's right here helping you out.
All right.
That's his department.
And then we'll bring on. Does Richard have an outside window to his left?
It's true, I do. What tipped you off? I try and cut it out of the frame.
See, I've got the green screen between me and the window.
Yeah, right. And where you've got part of my desk behind me.
Yep.
Which what can I see over my shoulder? I can see my tide chart, and I can see the picture of my family, and I can see an Intel NUC.
I never got into the NUC.
It's a computer so small it'll fit on a 100mm VESA mount. You can literally mount it on the back of your monitor. Like that is a small little computer, but great for like the kitchen computer.
Mm-hmm.
I got a nice big touch screen in the kitchen, and then I just hid the NUC away.
Hid it behind it, mounted it on it.
Yeah, you don't need to see it. It doesn't matter, right? You're not interacting with it. It's just a touch screen.
How good is the graphics on that?
It'll run a 1080p screen, no problem.
Ooh, okay.
In theory, it'll run a 4K screen, but then you find out that the itty bitty little NUCs, they have fans.
That's the wrong way to find out that they have a fan.
Yeah.
Oh, did we lose Kathleen?
I'm still here as far as I can tell. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, Cameron is still working on the picture. I don't quite know what we've got going here, but he is madly working on this as we speak.
Let's go ahead and ask him to add you on Skype so they can get.
Well, we have your audio.
Okay, so Cameron just asked you to also add me to the call so we can get the computer screen also, because I might share some stuff.
Yep, I've got that set. So to add your hang on, we'll do that too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, otherwise I don't think you get my monitor. Yeah, no.
Yep. So we will add Kathleen.
Okay, so Cameron's going to have to tell me how to make that work, because I was going to push the HDMI switch and then I thought it was going to, we're going to change.
Richard.
Can you hear?
I can hear you.
All right, here's Cameron.
Hey, Richard. So right now you have the channel 9 on this machine added to the Skype call, and I have her video coming through. But if you add Kathleen's account through Skype, she can screen share and you can get her computer feed that way. That makes sense.
So we've added Kathleen. We're waiting for that connection to complete.
It's not I'm not seeing the call come in. I should be getting a Skype call?
I'll remove and re-add.
'Cause I'm not getting a Skype call from you right now. And that's going to be from you, Jeff?
Yep.
I'm not getting one from anybody, but yeah. Does it help if I call you? And do you want Cameron to zoom a little bit on me?
We can't see you yet.
Oh, that's right. Never mind.
You want to move a little to your right. Perfect. And just move your mic to face it.
Yep. All right.
There we go. Adding again. This is live video, right? This is a little bit of the challenge of adjusting and pulling things together. There we go. There's Kathleen.
Ooh.
Awesome. He found me.
All right. I've got the other Kathleen coming on.
The other Kathleen. The other Kathleen's. Oh, let me answer now.
And then just share your screen.
Okay. I get crazy echoes. So mute my computer.
There you go.
Let me see. That's solved. That. Okay, great.
Don't worry about the setup.
Okay, so I'm done with that. Okay, so I'm a little bit loud in my own ears, so let me fix that real quick. Jeff, can you say something, or Richard, so I can make sure I can still hear you guys okay?
We still hear you.
All right, so I just need to share my screen. Hang on just a second. Why is everything different? I'm not seeing how to share my screen through this Skype. Okay, so.
It's on the bottom.
Yeah.
About 3/4 of the way over to the right when you mouse over the video. You'll see two squares interlinked.
Different icon. So share screen. Okay, so now you should be seeing yourselves. Are we good there?
Yep.
All right. Okay. So there we go. And so am I the sides, because Cameron left for a minute. And
one last thing. Go over, mouse over the video that you see of yourself in the top right corner there. There's a close button in the top right. You can close that. And now we can see your desktop. Here we go. Let's bring on Kathleen first, and then we'll look at your screen. There she is over on that side. Hello, hello.
Hello. I'm finally hooked up, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
And I'm realizing that I am not outputting video to you. All right. So how's it going, Kathleen?
It's going great. This is a kind of an exciting time, so I'm just really enjoying the whole week, and things are awesome. It's been a great week.
A Visual Studio launch, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Huge deal
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was just an amazing job on that, on the whole launch experience, I thought. And I'm very, very excited about Visual Studio 2019 and what we're doing with .NET Core 3. So that's super exciting. It's a little different than my workshop, but we can talk about both, I hope, today.
I got to think these things are going to impact your workshop too, right?
A little bit, but the workshop really focuses. Some of my thinking is around these trillions and trillions of lines of code we have out in the wild that are running real companies doing real work every day. And that's not code that's immediately affected by .NET Core 3 or Visual Studio 2019, even, although some of it will be, it'll be able to run in it, of course. And then C# 8 as well. These are things that'll come in, but it's a slow uptake process. And I think that's awesome. I mean, I think it's great that we don't suddenly have to like reset our world, but we can have this long tail. I think it's the challenge of our age. And it is in the same way that if you go back to the 70s and 80s, it was figuring out where to apply computers. And initially it wasn't obvious. The answer was everywhere, you know. And so and then throughout, you know, we had a couple decades where it was putting computers everywhere. And I think the next challenge is the fact that we have so much code running in so many places, and it's going to age. And if you look out into anything like the housing inventory we have, so we have houses of a tremendous age, and we find a natural rhythm for how that works. And obviously, more houses are built than we have old houses taken down because we're growing. And I think the same thing happens with our programming and these trillions of lines of code is we'll grow, and we'll grow faster than we have to retire code. But we still have this huge inventory, and I think across that inventory. So the workshop is really focused on C# basics. And so they apply for C# 8, absolutely, but they also apply going back to, say, maybe C# 4, because, I'm going to, maybe a little before that, maybe to link. I'll talk some about generics and GC and things which go back further. But if somebody's on C# 2, they're just stuck right now, and I don't know what to say about that. But if you're on like a C#, 4.6, one version of 4.6 or 4.7, then you're getting ready to go to 4.8, then this applies there as well as the .NET Core, C# 8, new stuff, cutting edge, where we have new types and we have very new things over there. So anyway,
are there new aspects of C# 8 that you would consider basic now? Like if you're living in a C# 8 world, there are different kinds of basics you need to know?
I would say yes, because I'm a huge fan of pattern matching, but pattern matching in a case statement, it was good if you already had a case statement, but expressions are, I think, a better way to solve those problems. And so for C#, for C# 8, I do think patterns are the piece that you need to bring in the same way that you needed to understand LINQ. When LINQ first came on, and you needed to understand async and these things to actually use them. I think that is the going forward feature.
Right.
The big marquee feature, and the one that has taken so much effort and so much love, has been the null reference types. Yeah. But that's very unique kind of feature because the uptake of that feature requires effort. So I can even show you an example of how you can uptake a switch, and it's a natural process, and at all points you just feel like your code's getting better. The thing about null reference types is its purpose is to give you a bunch of warnings. I mean, that's its goal in life, is to tell you that your code has problems. So because of that, as you uptake it, you put it in, and all of a sudden you have hundreds, maybe thousands of warnings, and you have to just take a deep breath and start addressing that. Probably turn it off, except a few places, till you start getting used to it. And the uptake there takes effort in and of itself. And so it makes it a different kind of feature. It's not like a little drop-in feature that we're used to. This is a very profound change to say that you can enable a feature at which point you will switch the default behavior of a type from being by default nullable to by default not nullable. And that's a really basic change. I think it's great. It just is going to require attention for uptake on that.
Yeah, I just wonder how long it's going to take to propagate that through an existing code base. And is it worthwhile?
I think that's a great question. And I think that there is a lot of answers, a lot of factors to consider in that question. So first of all, if it's old code that you touch once a year, then I think the strategy in your company might be to figure out how you identify so programmers can come in and have a good sense of whether the code they're looking at should have null concerns in the way the code is written or null concerns handled by the null reference type work that has been done. So if it's older code, I think that's the kind of way that you would think about it if you don't touch it very often. If it's brand new code that you're writing from scratch, then I think it's kind of simple. I mean, just go with this feature if it's brand new code. The problem is there's a huge range between those two ends. And when you're looking at the right decision for any particular company, it depends on the people that are involved. It depends on what you think the life cycle of the project's going to be, where you're at in terms of the business needs to get delivered. There are so many pieces to that decision that I just think we need to be patient and let people take that up. You asked how long. I think the answer is forever. I believe that there will be C# code that is written today that will go through its entire life cycle and never be updated. That doesn't make the feature less worthwhile, because the feature is so that we do have a way that in 5 years and 10 years, we'll have a way to write code that is null protected. And so it's a very special feature for all those reasons.
Yeah, the feature has to start at some point. Let's start it now. And although the debate about null reference types was huge, like it's a long discussion that's been going on to decide to do this and the right way to do it.
In the chat room, Hugo actually asks, from a management perspective, when adding a new language feature, how do you decide that opt-in, opt-out?
Yeah, this is a rare feature that has an opt-in, opt-out. I mean, Visual Basic, and I'm the Visual Basic PM, so this doesn't happen to be a talk about Visual Basic, but I love Visual Basic too. It's used to having opt-in, opt-out, so it's had options since the very beginning of VisualBasic.net. So it's only on the C# side that this is a bit of a new thing to say that you're going to opt in for a class or an assembly or an entire project. You're going to make that scope. And how you make that decision, like I said, is a really hard decision. I think that the biggest factor is how much code you expect to be changing within the next 6 months or a year. I think that's the number one question to ask. And the number two question to ask is, what's your team like? How do they feel about this feature? And how easy do you think it's going to be for them to make this change in thinking when they look at some code? Ultimately, so much work went into this feature to make it a feature that once you've transitioned, you never have to think about. The whole goal of this is you think less about null reference because you're protected naturally instead of protected through guards and other things and having null reference exceptions happen.
Right.
So all the work that, not all of it, but this huge amount of work, and it was so detailed, you just cannot imagine how tedious the details of this were, to say, what will people expect here? What's the natural thing here? How do we not go too far? How do we not go far enough? And trying to thread that needle has had so much love and so much attention and effort over the course of the last, year and a half, 2 years, since they figured out this was a possibility and then started going.
How much of that discussion happened on GitHub, effectively in public versus in the hallways at Microsoft?
So that particular set of discussion is a very intense discussion. And so it actually goes on in an LDM meeting that happens weekly. And
hang on, LDM?
I'm sorry, thank you. Language design meeting. And that language design meeting is that LDM is kind of roughly used to define a set of people and a particular meeting every week, a couple of meetings actually. And so in those meetings, these are language designers and compiler devs that are absolutely amazing. It, they blow me away all the time, and just in terms of how smart they are and how they think about the side cases. And there's a very, very intense effort to look at side cases and think about problems. And then, of course, as the compiler gets worked on, more things come up.
Sure.
That's where that happens. Those have design notes, and the design notes are fully public. And the intent is the outcome of that meeting is completely public. But on occasion, somebody's come to visit from inside the company or somewhere, and as visitors, they have walked away just going, it's amazingly tedious. No one would ever want to watch that. And it's important on that people be able to make mistakes and say dumb things. And so those are the reasons that while we are broadcasting some other meetings, that one we're not yet broadcasting for those reasons.
I think there's a level that those folks that are designing programming languages are thinking and acting at that most of us, the garden variety developers out there, gosh, to try and keep up with some of that discussion it's impossible. It's way too difficult.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm in there at every meeting, and I learn more all the time and get closer to keeping up. And there's definitely times when I am absolutely skating on top of the conversation, and many times that something on the side, a side case, a niche case will come up, and I never would have thought of that case. So I have an enormous amount of respect for every single person that's on the LDM, and it kind of fluctuates who's there in terms of the particular topic. But anyway, it is a very important. Everybody cares a lot about that effort, and so. Sometimes there's disagreements, and that's that happens, and I think in the end it comes out with what's a really good product. I think that when you look at the challenges around getting null reference types right, I'm sure there are things that are not quite right. I'm sure that there were mistakes made. Hopefully they were small and on the side. It won't affect people, but I'm sure as people uptake it, they'll go, oh, I think I should have gotten a warning there, or oh, that warning's kind of like I kind of wish I hadn't gotten it. But they're all warnings. You can turn them off, and the goal was to get almost all of them to be exactly the warning you want, exactly where you want it. And that was it's been such an effort to get there.
So some of the folks in the chat room are mentioning it's not a language design meeting that is hosted on the Visual Studio Twitch channel, but once a month the language designers are there and talk about some of the features that are kind of happening. They're in flux. They're coming, right?
Yes. And so the community stand-ups we're growing those inside Microsoft. We've added a few new ones recently. We're super excited about that because it gives an opportunity for the kind of early exposure. As I said, there's the meetings are like they're meetings. Okay, so but the output of those it's always intended that be public. Andy Gaki does a great job of getting those notes up relatively quickly. They're detailed. He's a great designer and compiler dev, and so you can see that pretty quickly. I don't know if I should say who our note taker is, but he's awesome, and we get these great notes coming out. And so there was a question I had this morning on a feature that's already out, actually, and it's just out. It's in Preview 3, and I was like, I don't remember exactly what that syntax is. And it's so new that there's not yet blog posts about it, but I could go back to those language design notes and I could find it. So if you want to know what's going on, please read the language design notes and then the summary that we will do in the community stand-ups that we're doing. So, yeah.
It's very cool. And comes back, Richard, to what we were saying earlier. The nature of community is providing that feedback that grows and pushes these features, the programming languages that we all rely on, in an amazing positive direction.
Yeah,
I just hope it's in an engaged way, right? I think there's and I'm sure there's two CAF. Like there's C# and VB.NET developers out there that aren't aware of the GitHub community, that are still building product and making things happen, and they may not have ever engaged this way. It's very interesting to think. We've certainly, these new tools have expanded the circle, but it's not the whole circle.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's this range of that, Richard. There's no black and white in this. There's people that we talk to because they're MVPs or whatever that we'll talk to a couple of times a year. There's people that we're going to never, ever, ever, ever see, and maybe never even touch. And they're all over the world. They're not all speaking English. And there's all these challenges to reach out. So in addition to listening, we also really think about those developers that we're not hearing from, because it is the majority of the developers are people that don't actually touch with us. We see this small group, and in general, the small group we see is on that, talked about this range of people that are like, a range of code from like, it's changing all the time, it's brand new, down to it hasn't changed in a year. Sure. And folks that are working on those big, massive code bases that are so important to running the world. These are critical code bases. I applaud those people. I think it is amazing that they keep us going. Yeah. But I may not ever talk to them. No. We do user studies, though. We also do bring in the best we can do for an average developer. Sure. We do bring them in. I do that every week. I actually watch developers work with tools every single week.
I think on the Studio 2019 intro video, there was a part of the user labs. Of watching folks come in. Although there's only certain people that are going to have the time to be able to go into those labs, and I love that they're there. It occurred to me that the big thing about what's happened with the GitHub relationship with coding is that it's democratized it. If you want to participate, just do it.
Here it is.
It's just a web page. Like, the bar necessary to be engaged in that community now is you have an internet connection and a web browser. As opposed to, I think back, because I've been doing this since the 80s. In the 90s, where you could take 4 days off, fly to Seattle, and go to a software design review to be a part of something.
Yeah.
And it's the same for the folks that are going into those user study rooms. Like, that's a big commitment, as opposed to I pop in my browser, I read up what's going on with the product, and I can file an issue, I can make a comment, like I can be part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can pick your interests too, because we have places, both C# and Visual Basic have GitHub repos for design. So it's VB Lang and C# Lang. They're very different, but if VB Lang actually is design-wise moving towards more of a community design effort, and so there's actual design that goes on live in that repo. And then if you look at some of the other places, what we need desperately is feedback and pain points. And we have a couple of ways you can do that. But GitHub repos are so great. And so if you're like, I'll tell you a pain point we know about and haven't solved yet, which is, if you have a bunch of old SDKs on your machine, feel free to tell us that you don't like that. We want, I know that one, because yes, we need to find a way to fix that, and we've improved it. Okay, we haven't quite solved it yet, but hearing those pain points. Well, the thing is, I can just tell you that real quick. Going forward from Preview 3 on, we will overwrite old versions of the SDK that have the same feature bands. So like 3.0.100, all the 3.0.100s you put on your machine will overwrite each other, Preview 3 and beyond. So you won't have, like I could show you my machine, but it would just be too sad. Because I'll take whatever build is out there sometimes. It's every time I need a build, I just go get one and I don't clean it up. But what we don't have yet is an automated way to get rid of these ones that are on your machine right now. So that is still add remove programs on Windows or on another operating system, the appropriate way to get rid of a program. So that we feel bad about that, but because I also do the .NET Core CLI and SDK. So that was why I kind of shifted away from languages for just a second to a particular pain point. But we all of the teams want to hear not only your like great idea, not only your feedback on ideas that people have, but also just your pain point. Just this hurts, and just knowing that is so helpful.
Yeah, where people are struggling.
There's a comment here from Electric Havoc. I love when they talk about silly optimizations like changing a string to some crazy byte array and bit shifting characters to gain 300% perf. Yeah, there's something to be said about, that made Kestrel just tremendously performant.
Yeah. Yeah, so the good news about performance is that most of the performance improvements drive improvements that everybody sees, even if you're not writing any code that has performance, high performance drivers. And so most code people write themselves, like almost all of it.
Mm-hmm.
These performance changes aren't actually going to directly change your code very much. You're unlikely to be able to measure it. But when you look at things inside the BCL or inside, inside CoreFX, inside the BCL, inside ASP.NET, inside these tools that you're using, it can be enormous improvements in performance there. And also other things inside Microsoft and inside libraries and all of these places. It's not just that your line of code might go a nanosecond or a millisecond faster. That's not the important thing. It's that this other code that does something like like we just changed the JSON.NET. We have added a new way to do JSON parsing to move from the Newtonsoft to something that's much more performant. And so people have the choice to use the Newtonsoft, which is richer features for sure, or the faster in one that's baked into the BCL going forward. And so that work, oh my gosh, yes, we need to be able to tune that to so fast. Mm-hmm. And that's where these little tiny improvements come in. So yeah, I love it when they come up with, oh, I managed to save, 300 milliseconds is a lot actually. So that's enough that you're going to see.
When you have scenarios like that, Kathleen, is that coming directly from a customer, or is that just a general movement towards performance?
It's generally a movement towards performance. There are people at Microsoft that both from their what they like to do and what they are tasked to do spend a lot of time thinking about performance and thinking about the things that contribute to performance. So,
well, and I remember I've had Hunter on a number of times on .NET Rocks, and he talked specifically about when there is an ongoing initiative to place well on the mPower benchmarks.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And I guess that you commit resources. I mean, in the end, it's money, right? They're spending money on a team that runs those benchmarks internally, studies how it's performing, feeds it back to the coding teams to say, here's where we see we might be able to get some performance gains.
Right. And then one of the things I will talk about my workshops, I want to just, plug my workshop well in here, is I generally talk a little bit about GC. And the workshop changes. Every year that I give the workshop, I change it because I do have people that come year after year because it was valuable and they want to learn new things. But I'll probably do at least a little bit about GC because I generally do. And I heard something years ago that really stuck with me, which is that you don't have a GC problem, a garbage collection problem, but you might have an allocation problem. Because
that only shows up when the GCs come around.
Exactly. So I can tell you that allocations are huge inside all of the high performance code that Microsoft works on. There's a huge effort. Oh my gosh, we can save allocating 100 bytes. That's something that there's code that's important to, because it runs enough that allocation is going to add up, drive more GC, and cause a bigger problem, because we don't want CoreFX and the BCL to be driving GCs into people's programs. I mean, that's not its job. Its job is to do the opposite. So so it's an aspect of performance is the allocations, and I'd like people to understand allocations a bit more than most programmers actually do. And so that's one of the areas that I'll probably take a deep dive into. Now that I've said it, I will. I can commit to that. I'll take a deep dive into this for at least enough that you walk out with a better handle on how to look at that in your own code.
I wonder more these days about how much folks still focus on performance tuning. I mean, I spent most of the .com boom performance tuning websites for folks. It was a great way to make a living.
Yeah, it was.
And I just feel like with cloud these days, you just turn up the knob. Like, I don't actually need to be that efficient. I'm not squeezing milliseconds near as much anymore. If I don't have to buy the hardware and the site's making money, the fact that I can turn it up, the cost of development to get incremental performance improvements is too high compared to that I can solve the problem with an increase in utilization on the cloud.
That's true up to a point. It's also true every time you move the dial, that costs you money as well. So one of the things, and I'm sorry, I can't remember if I'm doing my profiling talk at DEVintersection or someplace else, but it's about looking back for the big dumb things. Okay. And
Yes.
that's really what and honestly, Richard, back during the .com days when you were doing that work, how much of that was finding dumb stuff?
Latency. You know, it was.
Yeah.
I used to do this talk, which I stopped doing it after I sold Strangeloop. That talk was stop looking at your code, right? Your reflex that it was to look at your code, you're probably squeezing the wrong thing. Go back and look at your number of round trips, like all of the other things that go into a page rendering, and that's often where you see the big win, right? It's like I consolidate these things into fewer round trips, and I save a second this page where coding my brains out saved 300 milliseconds.
Right. So, that big picture of how you think about it, end to end, which is what you're talking about right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for example, understanding async sufficiently to go from, where you enter your web page and how, async is viral. People say, oh my gosh, it goes everywhere. And yes, that's the point of it, is that you have to take your entry point and wander down to that call to the database that might be slow. And then say, oh, okay, we're gonna have to wait now. So let's go tell ASP.NET that we're gonna wait, and it might as well do something else. And that message of, hey, we might be a while here, has to go all the way back up to ASP.NET, so we can say, oh, I can do something else until you get back with me. And that's the logic behind the big picture of async. But we do sometimes get really in the weeds, and unfortunately for async, it means sometimes people don't get that simple idea and wind up doing things that actually makes it slower than it would be if they hadn't used async, which is terribly sad when that happens.
But not broken, just not as efficient as it could have been.
Yeah. Well, if you've got part way back up, you go, oh, well, I think I need that value now. And you don't quite get the continuation the way it would handle it right there. And you do a dot value. It's like, well, I might as well, and for an ASP.NET application, it's like, yeah, you might as well not have done async there. So, because it just blocks until it comes back. So instead of blocking at the database, you're blocking someplace on the way back up. Yeah, that's not helping you much. So yeah, we'll probably talk about async as well in the workshop. That's the kind of stuff, I want to kind of give a flavor of what the workshop is and the fact it's not cutting edge stuff. I think I'm doing a C#8 talk there.
The C#8 talk and the functional techniques talk.
The functional technique talk. Well, that's a great talk because.
Well, that's why I asked for it.
Yeah.
I just like the way you talk about functional, Kathleen. It makes me really happy. I really appreciate your approach.
Oh my gosh. We just jumped off of performance, but I think that's okay.
Huge. Yeah.
So first of all, I have to say, I have two very different children. One of them is Visual Basic and one of them C#. And I don't love Visual Basic less because I love C#. They're different. They're very different languages at this point, and I embrace them for their differences. But for C# right now, I believe that we do have an opportunity to work with the best language that has ever been. Yeah. And not ever will be because we're not that smart, but I think it's the best that has ever been, particularly in C# 8.0. And this has to do with features in addition to null reference types. So I'm going to set that one aside. But when we look at the ability to use expressions, which keeps pulsing into C#, then where we can do functional techniques based on things we got in 2005. Wow. We're going back using those features. So most of that talk you could actually do, not as gorgeously, but you could do in 2005. This is a very bringing our best thinking about the way languages can operate onto this really good core that we've got in C#. And so that's what that's about. It's not actually cutting edge features that talks about. It's about using cutting edge thinking with the base that we've got, and then the work that's been done on expressions in C#, 6, 7, and 8, which all brought in more expression work. Then that makes it look good. That's the pretty part of it.
Nice. Well, and I do think, and I love that's one of the parts I asked for was just this realization that functional is a methodology. And the language is simply how you're going to implement that methodology, that you have a choice to approach this. It takes a lot of discipline, though.
It takes getting used to, absolutely, for sure. It absolutely does that. And there's a thing that I show in that talk about inside-out programming and outside-in programming. And I should probably get that on a video someplace because it's a pretty simple way to start thinking about one aspect of it. The great thing about C# is that C# stays very grounded in where it's best, which is object-oriented work. And so you're taking object-oriented thinking, which is very comfortable, and we have the
Super familiar.
The bulk of business programmers use that between Java and C#. That's in VB as well. This is a object-oriented base, and then it's there first. So it's object first, but then high functional, as opposed to some other languages which are functional first and then object-oriented or not object-oriented.
Right.
And so this is why I just love that sweet spot. And I feel like right now C# is at a sweet spot and is continuing to grow in a way that's going to expand on that for at least the next couple of versions, with some of what we're already talking about being on the radar, like records. That just expands that direction. So it's a very exciting time, I think, to be a C# or a Visual Basic or an F#, or even a bunch of other languages that I won't try to list because I'll leave a bunch out. So I'll just stick with, and I'll add TypeScript. There's good things going on across languages today. You'd think we would have it. We've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
So it's a bit surprising to me that we haven't found that tied up with a ribbon, and languages are kind of what languages are. No, that's still pretty exciting space.
Yeah, we're still never going to get to the one right way, and I hope we don't. It's more fun to have this diversity. But we did do a .NET Rocks episode with a Haskell guy who was talking about migrating from he'd learned functional from F# and then had a circumstance where he could explore Haskell to build services for a larger .NET application, because it's just a service model. It doesn't really matter. Okay. And there are aspects of the work that pure functional was delightful for him. Like, you're talking about using C# with discipline to use functional methodologies, as opposed to F#, which is very much functional first.
Yep.
But still you could misuse it, to Haskell, where it's like, if you don't follow this pattern, it's just not going to work for you. Like the cliff is much taller to get over, and everything's going to be functional. Like I like that those sort of three attributes is like, there's a discipline approach, there's a tooling approach, and there's a paradigm approach.
Yes, absolutely. And I've actually taught a little bit of Haskell. I used to have a 75-minute. I could never do it in an hour, but I used to have a 75-minute. Here's Haskell course for C# developers. Nice. And I don't know if I can give a shout out to which video platform it's on, but the Fundamentals of Haskell course parts 1 and 2 on a popular video site are my son's, and so
I presume plural site.
Yes, it is. It's the plural site. Haskell.
You can say the P word.
You can say that.
All right, great. I just didn't know. I don't know why. I don't know what the rules are here. So
no. We're not.
So the plural site, Haskell. I think he did an absolutely amazing job. It was a while ago, so some of the video, it doesn't feel like it was done yesterday for sure. Right. But Haskell doesn't change. So it's a super good introduction, I think, in terms of, wherever you're coming from, this is where you go with Haskell. Unfortunately, he didn't find time to do the building websites in Haskell course that he thought about and planned and didn't get done. And now he works for another large tech company. No, he works for Google now. So he's tied up with what he does over there, which I'll shout out to that. He was part of the streaming game stuff they announced at Game Developers Conference. So,
Stadia.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was working on that. So anyway, once you get back to what we're doing here, we're not, I just shot out to the competition there.
No, we were already talking about latency, so we could talk about Stadia.
Yeah, I don't know much about it, except that that for a little while I got to say, and he was a teenager, he's, I'm open source and you Microsoft stuff, and they're so uncool. That's not the future. Nice. So for a while, I got to say, hey, I'm working on open source for Microsoft. Right. What are you doing? And his answer for a while was, I can't tell you, Mom. and now he can talk about it. I don't know if what he's actually doing right now is part of. They are contributing to some open source things, like some open source video debugging and a bunch of other open source stuff as part of the project. I don't know that all of it is. I haven't paid that much attention. Sorry.
Yeah, it's such a blurry line these days now between what's open source and what isn't, and what company and what not. I mean, Google's made plenty of open source projects, right? I mean, think Kubernetes.
Sure.
And if we're talking about languages, I want to shout out to the fact that my other son, I have two sons, my younger son has actually given me a better appreciation for Ruby, and actually both for Ruby and for kind of like, why not Ruby? Both, I will say that, because he's in Ruby, but he does have this winsome feeling towards strongly typed languages, which of course makes me feel great. But anyway, I'll give a shout out to Go Spot Check, which is the startup he works for in Denver. So but he definitely has given me a much better view for a language that just, it's like, you don't have to think, you just dive in. And,
and the Ruby on Rails was a revolution in web development.
It was. And
it changed everything.
It was. And I think that now going forward, that it's not a language I would pick. I would say that. I do appreciate it, but it's not one I would pick. I work on the languages I would pick. I did pick, because I was 20 years in MVP before I came to this job. And so I absolutely love the C# and where it's going. And I got to give the functional talk before I joined the team. And now I get to do it from the team, which is just awesome.
To pick on Ruby for a second, I ran into the same problem that I have with JavaScript, and that's it's too dynamic. I end up running it. You okay there?
That was mean. No, I just you just made me laugh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I run into this problem where it's too dynamic. It's right. I couldn't effectively use an editor with it, and this was back in 2010, 2011, as Ruby on Rails was just hitting, and it was like, there's so much power here that I have to think too much in order to effectively use the language.
Oh, I think what you just said is actually, I'm going to state it a little bit differently, but I think it's one of the really profound things that we can say about, again, this kind of age in the development of programming and computers, which is that I need magic I don't have to think about.
Yes.
So if you think about ASP.NET, it does an enormous amount of magic for you, okay? But it's in the middleware pipeline now, and you just go, yep, don't need to think about the middleware pipeline today.
Yeah.
I'm authorized by the time I get here. Where Ruby didn't quite hit that, Ruby on Rails didn't quite hit that sweet spot. It's a little hard not to have to think sometimes about the magic. And it's more work and more risk and more hassle to think about the magic than it would have been to do it without the magic. And so I think it's really important, and important what we're doing here at Microsoft, that going forward, we look for that sweet spot where, you didn't have to think about the magic. It was there, and you could go dive in when you want to understand it, but it's more like your car. I used to work on cars. I don't want to work on modern cars, but I used to work on them. And so I know what's happening under the hood, and I never think about it driving down the road. And
I think it's a great analogy, Kathleen, because it is the same. I feel like we're in that transition now where, you don't work on cars now because it's basically impossible, but you also don't need to because they're so much more reliable. And I'm feeling like that bar of what is plumbing, what is middleware is moving up more and more, where everything under that threshold, we just expect it to work. It needs to be reliable and stable. And above that, we're going to experiment. And you don't dip below that line because it isn't easy to maintain, but it is very reliable.
Yes, I completely.
As we talk about the car and the things that are wrapping around C# and VB, .NET Core 3 is coming along, right? We've got a couple previews out.
Yeah. And there's one thing about .NET Core 3. If I only show one thing, I would love to show this one thing. So can you, let me get over here.
Sure.
And let me show people one thing.
Sure, there we go. Now they can see us.
This is subtle.
Okay.
Not in a good way, okay? So first of all, .NET Core 3 does not ship with Visual Studio 2019.
Right.
.NET Core 3 will go to full release sometime later this year. Okay, so that's what we said, and that's what we've got. It is not ready now, but you might want to play with particularly C#8. So in order to play with C#8, what you want to do is go into the our lovely build as my application. Sorry, go to build, and then go to advanced. This is that window that has it down below the fold, has the advanced button, and then come over here and select either C#8 or select unsupported preview. Now the problem is, this is where the subtle part comes in, is that for most of you, almost everybody listening to this, if you go do that in Visual Studio 2019 right now, you will not see either of those entries.
Interesting.
And the reason is that by default, we don't want to give people previews. We want people to understand when they're in a preview and when they're not, that this needs to be in control of the people that are using Visual Studio. So to make that available, you have to go to Tools, Options, and then Projects and Solutions, and then .NET Core, and then there's a checkbox.
Okay.
Okay.
Got to turn it on, basically.
You know that thing I
That
said
means
about
these things.
feedback? We already do know that it should be easier. We do know that. We're just, I don't know exactly how we're going to land a change in that in the future, but I don't think it'll always be quite that hard, but you have to find these 2 hidden dialogues in order to get it set up.
So
but
tell you
once
what,
you do that,
chat room, grab a clip, take a clip of what Kathleen just showed us there in Visual Studio 2019, and let's see if we can promote that out there on Twitter. Share that clip of just that quick walkthrough of where to find turning on that preview feature in Visual Studio 2019.
that would be great. That's absolutely. I want to shout that from the rooftops right now, because I think it was the right decision to protect it and put it behind a flag.
Yeah, I agree.
Same time, the flag is a little harder to find than I suspect that at some future point, we will probably still have a way to turn previews on and off from Visual Studio, but it will probably not be so difficult.
Yeah, I don't know if I want you to make it easier. That it's a very specific set of steps, almost for a very specific machine or a specific instance, right? Where I want to experiment with new versions.
Right, and it's the using the new SDK, which is what you're enabling by that checkbox. That's for the machine, but the new SDKs are pretty stable. We also know that we may want more dials on that for people, but that's the current state of that. And then but using C#8, you have to make that second switch, so you're never using C#8 accidentally.
And so, can we go back to the list, because you had sort of the current preview edition versus the C# beta edition,
Oh, yeah.
which I guess is a specific C# beta.
Sure. Okay. So
Here, let me hide our nameplates. Let me hide.
Are you up there?
Let me hide us here for a second. Boom, boom, boom. There you go. Now you can see the whole thing.
So I'm currently on unsupported preview of next C# version preview.
So presumably that's later than the C#8 beta, right?
It's the same.
Oh, they are for now. They are, because it's bound to be a new build of 8, right?
Yes. So the way that you use this dialog is that you can select a specific version you want to be on. So for example, let's say you want to be on C# 7.0. Okay. Yeah. So then you would. Today, that's exactly the same as saying C# latest supported major version, right? Because 7.0 is the latest supported major, and 7.0 is that latest supported major minor, which is we say latest supported minor here. That's the default, and that's what most people probably want for applications that are in production, already running. You're not going to be playing with new C#8 features in them. You just want to keep them running. That's probably going to be the default, which is latest supported minor, which today is C# 7.3.
Right.
So if you say C# 7.3, you have penned your application to that. I'm going to do that just for, actually, I'll just pick preview there, just to show you what happens on this. And that is that if I go to my Solution Explorer, which is here somewhere, sorry. I like it on the left, but I've been trying to learn to put it on the right, because I understand it on the left confuses people sometimes.
Yeah, no.
So as soon as I
literally just had a Visual Basic flashback because it came up on the left.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so edit project file. Why am I not seeing it?
Because it's now just the double click on the project.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Jeff. Except that didn't work. Let me try it again. I'm not quite sure why I'm not seeing this right now. Is this not a .NET Core project? Oh, this is an old project. This is not, okay, so this is actually interesting slightly, is that this is a project that was created quite a while ago. That's why it says C# 7 demo. I've been using this particular project for a while. So it is actually, if it's a .NET Core project, it's actually not a .NET Core project. So it's not using the .NET, the new project system, which the only problem calling the new project system is it kind of makes the old project system sound old, and it's actually not. It's original. It's still supported. I have another project open, which is probably also the same thing. I'm going to open a new version of Visual Studio. I'm sorry, it's a lot to show you this one tiny thing. But we can keep talking about other things while I create a project.
So, Kathleen, actually, our friend Ulfius in the chat room is asking, any way to change the language version for all projects in a solution without having to go through every project?
Okay, do you remember what I said earlier about pain points? Can you let us know that? Because we talk about ways to do things like that and a couple of ideas around that. And I hope one day the answer will be yes. As of today, the answer is no, sorry.
Yeah, I could see that as a pain point.
So
I can too.
Well,
it's
okay,
just-
the version
Yeah.
is specified as it's an XML node in the CS proj file.
That's
So you
exactly-
could write a for loop PowerShell script to go through and just touch that everywhere.
You could also write a global tool.
Mm.
That's the first feature, the first real feature I landed. So I'll talk about global tools all day long. So now I've got this on preview. I'm going to say okay, and now I should be able to double click this and see line version.
There it is.
There you go.
And I think we have a few options. I think we have latest. I don't think we have IntelliSense right here just yet. Maybe one day, or you could put 7.3 if you wanted 7.3.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's it was a lot to get to that point, but yeah.
Mm.
So yes, you could write something that that went across your solution. There's challenges on things like that where getting them right so they're like at a 90% level isn't too hard, and so that's why we probably won't do that because we would need to get it to the 100% level, and that's a little bit tricky. And the biggest thing gotcha there is where it's run. And if you run it in a solution directory, then everything's clear. But if you run a project directory, should you go up to the solution directory? You can have a repo with multiple solutions in it. Do you go up there and do you go across solutions? Do you do the whole machine? What's the boundary? So all of those problems, okay, you can easily solve at a 90% level. And so, yeah, if somebody wants to do a global tool to do that across a solution, I think it'd be awesome.
Sounds like a winner idea to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. Great demo.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, I think that's about the end of the hour together, Kathleen. That went
Yeah.
fast.
It did. It always goes fast when I'm with you guys. So, yeah. So anyways, great fun. And
I'm
excited to see the new version of the talk, Kathleen. I'm sure it'll be great.
yeah, well, all these talks are updated. So the functional talk, which is on video from quite a while ago, has been updated quite a bit. I think it'll be clearer. And I'm just saying that it is a different talk than a similar talk that I have on video. So I'm really excited to get that out. The workshop, I'm excited about that. Working some on Bill Wagner on the content on that. He can't make it in June, but he's
that's too bad.
working on that. Yeah, it's really too bad he can't make it. And then the C#8 talk. I love it whenever Mads is there. I don't get to do that talk.
Yeah.
So, and I think I have a different twist on it. And he's got it on video because we try to keep him in front of people on video. So my talk will be a little bit different take on it. It'll be a little bit more focused on what you're going to do with it and why you care about these features and how to uptake the features. Just because I came out of writing code for a living, less than 2 years ago. And so I think a lot about what you're going to do with these features. And Mads thinks more about deep diving into how the feature works in detail, and both are good. But that's the kind of thing you're going to see in my talk at DEVintersection. I'm pretty excited about it.
Fantastic.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kathleen. This was fantastic, and we'll see you at Build, I think.
Yeah, I'll see you at Build. Just coming right up here.
4 weeks.
4 weeks. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. There'll be a lot of fun people here. I just found out another friend of mine I don't see often is going to come into town for that. So I'm very excited.
Terrific. All righty.
Okay.
We'll catch you later. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.
I had a invasion of otters at the boathouse last night.
An invasion of otters.
Yeah, like
you don't get this anywhere else, ladies and gentlemen.
it's I just had to tell you, like I've just seen the clip. It's like 5 minutes of 5 otters coming, tearing into the boathouse and rubbing themselves on everything. There's clearly a competition between groups of otters to, dominate my boathouse. It involves lots of peeing, apparently. So I would show you the clip if I could figure out how to share it, but it's bizarre. It's like, what is going on?
Oh my gosh. Well, we figured this out last time, how to do the screen sharing and make all that work here on the Dev Intersection show, and it was tremendous technology to get this working back and forth. Oh, yeah, you want to show this? We can look at this real quick.
Why not? I'll just run a piece of it.
One second. Let me get it queued up here so we can see there.
Totally random. Sorry
Totally
to bother
random.
anybody, but let me turn this on. It's a Nest Cam. This is the boat shed. So this is literally, not that I've ever had a boat in it because it has some problems. Not the least of which are those logs that got washed there in a storm. But
oh my gosh, here they come.
Here they come.
Look at this.
It's an invasion. Tell me this is not an invasion.
The invasion of the otters. Where's Jimmy?
Yeah.
Where's Jimmy Engstrom?
Oh, he's a raccoon guy, but I got clips of those too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It is 5 river otters, and yeah, they're coming out of the ocean because nobody told river otters they weren't allowed in the ocean. And it just goes on and on. I have some crazy clips from this boathouse. I had a California sea lion pull up in the front there and just park for 20 minutes. They just there's one of them actually gets on that post there and starts scratching at the post. There he goes.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
What are you doing? What is that?
Electric Havoc in the chat room is asking, where's the stream that we can pay bits to feed them like the chickens?
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to feed these otters, okay? I'm doing my best to stop them from damaging my property.
Oh my
I can live with the
gosh.
poop, but one of the reasons you can't put a boat in this boathouse is those otters will just tear it to bits. Like it is destructive.
It is. Oh my gosh. Richard, our friend Dallas, Steve Smith, is rating us right now with 20 viewers from his channel. Welcome,
that's
Raiders.
Awesome. Welcome, Raiders. Have some otters? I don't know how to explain to you why we have otters on the screen.
As one does, you have the IoT cameras in the boathouse with the otters invading. Oh my gosh. Welcome, Raiders. My name is Jeff Fritz. This is Richard Campbell over there on that
Hi
side.
there.
And we're hosting a little virtual Dev Intersection event today. We just got done. We just finished talking to our friend Kathleen Dollard, who's going to be doing a C# 8 session and Make You a Better C# developer workshop at our event coming up here in Orlando this June. And we're getting ready to bring on our next guest, Mr. Todd Anglin, to talk about JavaScript. There it is. And mobile development. So
Do we have him?
you know what? I don't think I have his Skype.
Uh-oh. That's
I'm
a problem.
going to have to cut away from the otters here. I'm sorry. We're going to have to
No
cut
worries.
away.
What you got to do? Bye, otters.
Goodbye. There we are. We're back over here now. Electric Havoc is suggesting dam-driven design is for beavers.
Nice. I haven't had a beaver in the pond yet, but had an eagle in the pond the other day using my pond as a bird bath.
That's impressive. All right, let me see if I can
It's bizarre.
find. We can get Mr. Anglin on the phone here. I think. Let's see here. So, I mean, you have a number of these IoT cameras set up around your property in different
I do.
places that folks can. Well, not folks, but folks can buy those devices and you can monitor what's going on around. But
Sure.
part of the world that you live in, you get some interesting wildlife stopping by.
Well, the first Nest Cam I ever got was the one you're looking at right there because they were doing damage to the building. And so we were just trying to figure out what's damaging the building and then discovered it was otters and then we put wire mesh down and things to sort of steer them away from doing any damage. And then I added another one to the pond, and that's when you find out, hey, we have deer that come by here every day and bear that come by in the fall and lynxes that drop by once in a while and raccoons and more otters. And there's that bloody, I'm telling you, that eagle clip, the eagle's using the pond like a bird bath. It's an eagle. He literally jumps in the water and fluffs the water through his feathers. It's the silliest thing I've ever
Huge
seen.
bird. Huge.
It's a big bird. Yeah, and he flew directly over the camera. Like it's just one of those crazy shots. So, yeah, I love them. They're expensive. You know, the camera's not cheap, and they charge a lot for the service too. By
But
the way, I have Todd in my list, so if you want me to add him to the call, I could do it that way.
I'm chatting him up right now,
Okay,
making sure we're ready to go.
Yep.
I think let's do it. He says, "All right."
Right.
So let's where'd it go? There's this one. And where'd he go? I just had him.
Oh, there's Steve. Made it to the alias. Thanks for the raid, Steve.
Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh.
Electric Havoc. If you want to look for a YouTube video, look for the Beaver Whisperer.
The Beaver Whisperer?
This is a French Canadian guy who learned how to manipulate. They have a problem where beavers will like plug up culverts and things because they don't like the sound of running water.
Okay.
And so he learned to redesign waterways so you don't have the sound of running water, so it doesn't trigger the beavers in the first place. And then he started using recordings of running water to get beavers to build dams where he wanted to build them. So they're literally using beavers to manage the water, the wetland areas in Quebec. It's the craziest thing ever. The Beaver Whisperer.
The Beaver Whisperer.
You have to deal with the accent, but other than that, it's like that guy.
There's no accent.
Beavers. We French Canadians?
No, not at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, he's great. He's hilarious because he's an outdoorsman, but he happens to be French Canadian. But literally got the beavers because beavers don't just build dams; they also dredge. They scrape muck off the bottom, and so it makes the waterway deeper and run faster. Like let's do an ecological this conversation. Like it's very important stuff.
Yes, it is.
And the fact that once upon a time you just shot them and did it yourself, and now it's like, no, you can work with the beavers, and they will actually help you.
There we go. There's the right Todd. I had the wrong Todd, and I thought I just added him.
All right. Now the problem is knowing how terms can be misused. What other meanings do beavers have?
There's Todd now. Let me just get him configured real quick.
Awesome.
Hello.
And add it into the mix. Oh, yeah. Just the way we planned it. Boom. There we go. There's Todd Anglin.
Ta-da.
I'm here.
Oh, my gosh. Thanks so much for agreeing to join us here. Why don't you give folks a quick intro?
Sure. Yes. I don't see you guys. Should I see you guys? I'm going to just go on voices here, so we'll make that
work. If you look at the camera coming off of my feed, you'll see the output that's going out.
Yeah. Wasn't there a second ago. Got it. Yeah. So Todd Anglin here, Vice President of Product at Progress, where I work on a number of very cool things right now. Products like Kinvey, backend as a service for applications, mobile apps, web apps, NativeScript, very popular open source framework for building mobile apps with JavaScript, which is partly why we're here today, as well as other cool things happening around chat and other things helping people build apps really fast. So that's what I'm doing today at Progress.
It's really great stuff. A huge assortment of products that improve folks' productivity. I haven't seen enough about Kinvey. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Kinvey, addresses a common challenge people have when they're looking to build apps quickly. So if you have to go build an app and build on the cloud, you've got great services in AWS and Azure and the raw cloud providers, but a lot of steps are still involved in going from just here's a bucket of services to here's something I can start building my app on. So Kinvey really aims to shortcut a lot of that, pulling together the pieces people need for identity management, for users, for data management, and a lot of helpful extra kind of developer syntax things like offline support for syncing data offline very easily, connecting to existing data sources, be it on-prem or in other clouds. So it makes it a lot easier for developers to quickly start building apps natively on the cloud. And one of the places where Kinvey is doing a lot right now is in the healthcare space. So it's one of those places where regulation matters a lot more. So Kinvey has HIPAA certification out of the box, and that brings a lot of people in who are trying to build healthcare apps in particular.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. People are doing some cool things with it.
Yeah, and important stuff. You guys have been building a lot of good frameworks. I'm thinking back to when we first started collaborating over your workshops. You were one of the first folks I thought really taught the idea of HTML5 well. Back when we thought
Yes.
HTML5 was a separate thing, like people
Yeah.
have been web dev for a long time. We were kind of afraid of HTML5.
Yeah.
And you had that really great approach, like, listen, this is not that different. Let me show you how this goes together.
Yeah, the good old simpler days of HTML5. Whatever happened to HTML6?
2012, right?
I know. Yeah, I mean, HTML5 was a great, I think, awakening for the web platform. That was really a key transitional moment for the web, going from a collection of links and pages, and we were doing some sort of simple things with CSS to suddenly kind of blossoming as an application platform with a lot of new powerful capabilities baked into the browsers. So I'd say what started there is still what's happening now in terms of how we see browsers evolving.
For sure. And your current workshop, the building mobile apps in JavaScript, I see the origins as still related to all of that, because you do tackle it from a web development perspective.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, PWAs in many ways are still an extension of what we started back in kind of the HTML5 era, so the 2012-ish time. And PWAs, to Google's credit, is just branding on top of more separate but evolving specs that give the browser more power. So this really is an evolution of kind of where those specs have gone. At this point, we have increasingly taken it as table stakes. The browsers can do things like store data. It was a big deal if you remember back in 2012 that you had local storage, you had
client-side
web
storage.
SQL. I mean, this was not anything we used to be able to do. So that's now table stakes. So we've got that. So now we're starting to talk about the more complicated things that web apps still struggle with, like offline support.
Yeah.
Does it work on the airplane? So that's kind of where we are now.
Just tolerating losing connection, getting connection back again, right? Like,
yeah,
so many web pages just barf at that moment.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a fair. I mean, the browser was made to assume you're connected to the internet, but reality is that the internet's not always there the way we move around today.
I can't remember who the quote's from. Is it Dyson or Dijkstra that said it was easier to put internet everywhere than to build a good disconnected client?
Right. Yeah. You know what? And I know Amazon's launching a bunch of satellites, so maybe we're still trying to
trying to fix that.
And Elon Musk too, right? Like, we're going to have all these satellites because it's like easier to put more internet
satellites.
Yeah. That's an easier solution than actually making a good disconnected client.
And they may have a point.
But I like this. What impressed me about the PWA models is more this movement towards the browser as the host of applications. Here's this thing, this container sitting there. You can put your application into it, and this is a set of services that give you that app feel.
Right. And that really is the question. I think when it comes back to it, is what does it mean when we say that app feel? Because I think we've been chasing that for a while, and we keep adding layers and layers of it. I think right now what we're saying is missing for that app feel is both where an application lives on your desktop or your home screen, and then how it works at all times. So back to the offline conversation. These are two key places where a web app quickly kind of crosses over to feeling completely like a web app and nothing like a native app when you run into those blockers. So PWAs are trying to address that.
But you run into then the Electron frameworks, right? The Electron app, where it's really just a browser hosting something that looks like an application.
But Electron is just like Cordova and like a lot of other solutions, which basically say, hey, the browser's a pretty good rendering canvas for building a lot of application stuff. Let's take all the good stuff with us, but it still needs more access to native capabilities than the web standards are going to provide anytime soon. So let's take that, wrap it up with something that can punch through the holes, access more native capabilities, and then just keep building from there. And I think that's really going to be key for the web platform, in my opinion, indefinitely. Web standards are implicitly slow because standards should evolve slowly because they're standards. So there's always going to be that thing that the native platforms can do today that the web platform will be able to do eventually. But I think there's another quote out there that said, I need to ship software today. So I've got to have some way to get it done. So I think we'll always have these needs to take web standards, enhance them to build things that the web standard will eventually be able to do, but do it more quickly. So that's what Electron does. That's what Cordova does. NativeScript kind of does that in another way. Things like React Native, NativeScript go a step further, kind of replacing the entire rendering stack as well. But it's all about trying to say, hey, the web platform is great, but it is implicitly limited to a secure sandbox known as the web browser. So how do you get around that?
Yeah, when that's an impediment.
Right, exactly. And it's not in all cases, right? There's a
No,
lot
no,
of cases where it's not, but there are cases where it is.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And earlier in this live stream, we were talking about this battle of the many approaches to trying to build a mobile application. And the fact that it's fragmented the way it is just is sort of proof that no approach is perfect. That if there was one right way, we'd be using it. And so each one of them has some merits, has different values. You got to figure out what works best for you. I appreciate that your focus is around the JavaScript story. That you're competent and comfortable with JavaScript. Here's how you can make mobile apps.
Sure. I think this is true for all forms of apps now, especially native apps. I mean, even the fact that we're talking about Electron, it's 2019. We've been building desktop apps for a while, but now there are multiple ways you can even go about building desktop apps. And I think the reality that developers are all struggling with is you can't just build an app for one platform or one operating system anymore. You have to consider mobile operating systems and desktops. And so everyone's trying to figure out what's the way where I can still deliver great user experiences, but not have to rewrite and then maintain a bunch of different code bases. And so that's why you get these various approaches, these various solutions to do that. I like JavaScript because it has the implicit benefit of also running natively in the web. So if you can take a JavaScript skill set, apply it to things that give you native output when you want it, but then take it and keep going in the web, to me, there's a lot of natural benefits to having that kind of stacked together.
And do you prefer the mobile web implementation over trying to package into an app on a phone?
That's a good question.
Depends a lot on the use case, I think. And there's been a lot of various studies and research into how apps are used, why apps fail when they are installed on devices. And my high level sort of take on this is if your app is one where the content is what users are primarily coming for, so kind of news apps or apps where consumption is the main goal, probably the web platform is a sufficient delivery mechanism for the app, and probably preferred. Users are going to find it by search. They're going to land it, they're going to see it, they're going to land somewhere else. But if you're building apps that have lots of data input, that require frequent usage by users, so maybe they use it several times a day, maybe it's part of their job, then I think you start to make the case that there is a reason to maybe push it onto the apps, into a native app container. It can live on the home screen. You have more access to powerful caching mechanisms, even secure caching mechanisms on the device. So very much use case dependent, but certainly not everything should be an app. That definitely was, I think, a pendulum we swung too far the wrong way initially, and now we're kind of coming back to balance.
There's a price to that app store, and I think that's the thing you've got to debate is can you live with the price of the app store, the delay in deployment and the battle around every time iOS updates, it's tough.
And I think
it's not easy.
When you do, Todd, the way you explained an app that you come into and you really want to look at and you're snacking on content, I think of Twitter as really being that canonical PWA, that progressive web app now, mobiletwitter.com, and you get a really nice experience, and they can update it whenever they want, and it's integrated with all the things because they're taking advantage of, like you were saying, some of those APIs now that are table stakes for the browser.
Yeah, and Twitter is an interesting one because it both proves the point, it proves the point in both directions because they have a great mobile web experience, a great PWA experience, but they also have a great native app experience for iOS and for Android. So the question that comes up is why do they have the native apps if their web app is there too? And I think it sort of gets back to for a certain class of their users, for frequent users, I dare call a Twitter user a power user, but for a Twitter addict, there are some things that they can do a little bit more robustly, certainly on iOS today, because iOS has some gotchas on their PWA support that the native apps afford. So, again, even the big guys who can spend a lot of time investing in PWAs still recognize the need to have multiple kinds of clients to hit all the users today.
Yeah, because of course PWAs, you have the manifest, so you can put an icon on a phone.
Yeah.
I just wonder if the average mortal can even tell the difference. Once the icon's on the phone, is it an app? Is it a PWA? Does it matter?
Once it's there, I agree. And to this point, Android is doing a lot better than iOS because though the icon may be on the home screen, how it gets there is very different. So most users over the last decade have been trained to go to an app store to install apps. And at least on iOS, you're not going to find the PWAs there. So is that a temporary thing? Will Apple continue to let PWAs start to feel a lot more like apps? It's probably more of a business kind of.
Yeah, they seem to
question.
like that App Store revenue, don't they?
They seem to love billions of dollars for some reason. So I don't know kind of where they will eventually just put their foot down and stop playing nice, because they are playing nicer today.
Yeah.
I should add, on the PWA space. They are adding features that no one thought would come to iOS for a long time, but it's still with a lot of caveats. Like an iOS PWA won't snapshot the screen, so when you do the kind of app switching in iOS, you just see a blank white square there, not a captured version of whatever app the user was using. So it's little like rough edges that would clearly be unacceptable if you're trying to produce a great app. That's still kind of the PWA story on iOS today.
And we're really talking about the limitations of Safari.
Limitation. I would hardly call it limitations as much as choices Apple's made.
Sure.
And I know that's maybe nuanced, but Safari clearly could do these things. They're not hard things to do, but Apple is clearly trying to decide how much to allow this to be a first-class story on iOS. And they're definitely moving slow on that.
Well, and I don't know how you would convince iOS users to switch browsers too.
Well, you can't today, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's only one browser on iOS. It's Safari and then
Safari.
wrapped Safari.
Right.
So,
But
that's probably a question for the courts to answer if I had to guess.
Yeah.
with the big announcements that Apple had around their service over the last few weeks here, right? The new arcade and the television interactions, it feels like they're stepping further away from the App Store. They're enabling other types of experiences, and maybe it'll be okay that data snacking app is a PWA, because they're going to go after the high value games and television interactive programming. Let that be maybe that's the vehicle, and they can back off on Yelp and Twitter.
I mean, Apple's clearly shown where the most money is for iOS in terms of apps, and it's definitely games. There's no doubt about that. At the same time, everything they talked about in the last week or so signals how much the service revenue is critical to their future. And so, in that, when you take that lens on it, App Store revenue is service revenue for Apple. So, kind of lives in this space of it's both not the most critical thing for them today, but very critical to their future. And so I think it'll be an interesting space to watch, especially not just in terms of Apple in isolation, but with all of the political interest around monopolies on app stores and privacy and everything else. I think a lot of tech companies are going to be forced to evaluate their policies around how much of the platform can they lock down or exclude competitors from, and iOS will certainly be part of that mix.
Yeah, I don't know how much stomach we actually have for regulations around that sorts of things. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, users are pretty happy. That's kind of the interesting thing. Users are generally not complaining. So this is sort of probably a broader political / world issue that we'll have to figure out.
Right. I feel like the Europeans have a lead on this interaction and this feel.
They certainly have laws. That is true. They made it interesting for even our customers working to build their apps. Suddenly with all the questions around GDPR and everything that they have to think through to ship an app legally, it's good for users, but it's definitely making new challenges for developers to figure out how to navigate this.
Yeah.
Gosh, the folks here on Twitch have been going crazy about Article 13 and the copyright laws they're bringing in, and the pains that are going to go around that. And there was even a joke. You might appreciate this, Todd. There was a joke going around that they passed Article 13, all this very extensive copyright enforcement, and then a day later they said, you know what? You can enforce daylight savings and time zones however you'd like. Well, the time zone database is copyrighted.
Naturally.
Of course.
We'll get to that in 5 years or so.
Right.
Not rush it.
Thanks, Europe.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the other side of whatever the heck's going to happen with Brexit before we really wrestle with any of this.
We're here arguing web standards and PWAs don't work right in iOS, and then there's Brexit, right? So there's sort of small and big world problems.
Yeah, no kidding.
For
the
sure.
gravity of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, when we think about PWAs and web standards, Google has been on the forefront of this with the Chrome browser, really pushing the boundaries on that. And then and we see the Chromium browser is adopted now by the Edge team, and we're going to see this growing monopoly of Chrome across the web.
Yeah,
I got to think, as the Microsoft guy on the call, I got to think it's actually not a bad thing that we have a web standard and we have a standard browser. It's like the canonical implementation of that. think that's a bad thing.
I assume this is the same talk track that would have happened in whatever it was, 2002, when IE6 had basically won the wars and was sort of sitting on top of the hill.
Yeah.
And I'm going to accept up front, because I think it's bad to make the argument that Chrome is the next IE6. At this point, Google's showing
I'm pretty sure that's
intention.
Safari, isn't it?
well,
because what was wrong with IE6?
Hang badges on browsers, probably.
IE6 was popular and it wasn't compliant with current standards. Dude, you're describing Safari today.
Yeah.
True. Though I would say by browser share, certainly Chrome holds much more weight than Safari, especially when you look at it holistically, not just on mobile and iOS, obviously.
Well, especially when you start thinking about who's implementing the Chromium rendering engine. So there's only one rendering engine, but that's not a whole browser. There's more to a browser than just a rendering engine.
The rendering engine is a pretty critical bit of it, but yes, there's the JavaScript engine. There's lots of other pieces that we now know make a lot of impact on modern browsers. But I guess, to the question of is this good or bad, in my opinion, it's kind of like biodiversity. You want a little bit of, you want a mix in there. You don't want to have sort of a single genetic track for all the future, because right now it's great. Google's investing heavily. They're pushing the standards. They're doing lots of good things in the names of users. But if you project that out, where there's no competition to that in terms of setting the agenda or what's important, it becomes hard to ever have influence if they start to go a different direction that broadly other people don't agree with. So who's to say? It's not a problem today, but you got to look a little further down the road of what's the implication of having one dominant
Chromium project is open source. It could be forked.
Absolutely, just like WebKit was, right?
Yes.
That's sort of where we got to Chromium from, kind of, in the early days.
Yeah.
But that's an opportunity then, because it's open source. That's an opportunity for us to say, well, it's a standard, it's open source, so anybody can grab it and implement it, whether it's on your phone or whatever. Yeah. And it certainly enables us to say, hey, that's a basis for, and coming back to Electron, an application model.
Yeah.
And certainly the open source is a great difference from the past, especially when you have multiple big companies like Microsoft and Google and others investing in that project. It's one thing when you have an open source project and there's one big company investing in it, and if they stop, so goes the project. But to have a good diversity of well-funded companies investing in a big open source project gives us a little bit more of that confidence that, okay, this thing can survive if different stakeholders go different directions, which is good.
Absolutely.
And the Chromium team, and I think what was the Edge team, I mean, those guys were collaborating on a lot of features in both JavaScript and HTML all along. Like, they've worked together for a long time. It's just now they're literally going to work on the same code base.
Which is, cool,
seems
right?
interesting. Yeah,
that's very cool.
I do agree with you, Jeff, that it is sort of nice that we're no longer kind of reinventing the wheel 3 times to implement every new web standard. It's kind of nice. We'll just hit it and go, as long as we're doing it kind of in the way where the different contributors agree on the implementation. But maybe we'll move faster. We'll see what happens.
Well, and now you get into, who has, who can accept pull requests?
Right, exactly.
That's a very interesting dynamic. But
yeah.
So, the case scenario that I look at is the Kubernetes scenario, because when Brendan Burns, who started that project while working for Google, moved to Microsoft, his admin rights to the Kubernetes project didn't change.
Yeah, right. Kind of interesting question. Is the individual the more important owner of these projects versus the companies? That's a really interesting question for the future, I'm sure.
And open source being open source. I mean, Google was clearly playing for Brendan while he was working on Kubernetes, which they implemented first in GCP. Yeah. And now, of course, Kubernetes is everywhere, and it's kind of won the orchestrator debate in that respect, just because of implementations. But now I start thinking in terms of the Chromium, like, what happens if one of those Google admins for Chromium comes to work for Microsoft? Because there's only so many places in the world where you can get paid to work on a rendering engine.
That's right.
Like I can think of like.
I think it fits on one hand. Yes.
Yeah. There's 5.
And Firefox is definitely out there just doing it for the love of it.
There you go. Right. Yeah. And maybe you'll throw the Opera team in there too. Right. But it's other than that, it's either Apple, Google, Microsoft. And so.
Yeah. And Safari and Apple clearly are sort of the foil here. And I know you mentioned it, but as it relates to even what we're doing at DEVintersections with PWAs and talking about mobile, it's sort of really important on that front, because no matter how fast the desktop's evolving or Edge is evolving and Chromium's proliferating everywhere, as long as Apple can lock out Chromium from actually coming to iOS, that's a non-trivial amount of the world's population, particularly in certain geographies where it doesn't matter how fast Chromium's evolving or how fast Google's moving, because iOS isn't moving at the same pace. So it's kind of a critical thing for developers to consider when they're thinking about building mobile apps, because you can get really wrapped up in the euphoria of, wow, it's all Chromium, it's all moving fast, but iOS. So
and then there's this chunk of your customer base. I don't know where it is right now. I guess it depends on where you are, but 25 to 50% of your customers that are just going to be, and then Safari. And again, back to that IE6 reference, right? There was a point in web development, and we were doing .NET Rocks then, where it's like you built for the web and IE6.
That's right. That was the.
And I see these conversations, right, where you're building for Chrome, and then Safari.
And hopefully we're still seeing that. I mean, we are starting to see some of that old IE6 behavior of we built it for Chrome, change your browser kind of thing.
Yes.
That's again kind of a bad old habit that we're recognizing from our previous generation of browser wars. But ideally we'll get past that.
Once even Scott Hanselman was like, dude, you need to upgrade from IE6. Like when you think back to when that actually went on, there was IE7 and IE8 by then. It's just that folks were still using the default browser because it came with XP.
And they were locked in. I mean, everyone, to your point, built to IE6. They built to a broken browser, and so to move to working browsers broke the apps, and that was a challenging thing for people to overcome.
Richard, I think we've kind of been circling this same topic throughout all three of our conversations today around community. And Todd, as that community needed to shift to the newer browsers, right? We need to encourage them. We need to give them the tools and the features they need so they can get there. And of course, the user community, right? Give them that push. And I remember the bar that started going around, right? Copy this code, put it on your website to encourage folks to upgrade their browser.
Sure.
Right? And everybody got that same drop-down bar that appeared at the top. And people started doing it, right? And this was a good thing. And now we're at a point where everything's open source and there's resources everywhere to go and customize. But I want to come back to your projects that your teams manage, like NativeScript, right? So, I mean, you're building and you're targeting so that folks can write JavaScript and build for those mobile platforms. You've got a pretty good sized community behind NativeScript to enable it on all the devices.
Yeah, so NativeScript has been a great project. We started in earnest really pushing NativeScript adoption probably early 2016, and from there to now, the adoption has just continued to hockey stick up. In fact, I was just checking numbers yesterday, and I think all of last year NativeScript was downloaded 2.4 million times, and in the first 3 or 4 months of 2019, it's already been downloaded 1.2 million times. So it's nice. It's accelerating, and that in part is because we've latched on to two very important communities for NativeScript. That's the Angular and the Vue.js community. We've done a lot to integrate those JavaScript frameworks into NativeScript, so developers with those framework skill sets can transport those skills and quickly begin building native mobile apps without changing what they already know for building for the web, which is a great benefit for a lot of teams.
Oh, who doesn't love a portable skill set?
That's always the dream. So the challenge is really making it as portable as possible, not like portable, but you have to relearn the way you do everything. So we've put a lot of energy into making that as portable as possible. The community, frankly, has put a lot of that energy in for us. The Vue community has been particularly self-motivated to enhance the integration with NativeScript. And what we're seeing now, kind of the bleeding edge of where all this has led to, is there's now a lot of work being done on both the Angular and Vue side for enabling code sharing projects. So single projects with an architecture which allows you to quite literally share the same code, not kind of copy, paste, or transport skills, but literally write the code once that will work for a web app and for the native mobile apps. And that's particularly useful in several different use cases, but especially the use case where you may want to have a PWA version of your app and a native version of your app so that you can hit, let's say, Android users with a PWA and hit iOS users with a native app. So it's an emerging front of where all this is going, but it's definitely cool to see how it's evolved over the last 3 or 4 years.
That is very interesting. Yeah,
absolutely.
And at this point, most people, I wouldn't say all because I still run into people who've not done it, but most organizations have tried to build mobile apps. So why are we in 2019 still talking about how you build mobile apps? And what we usually find is that let's say the version 1 or even version 2 of most companies' app strategies have failed for different reasons. They either tried to build all their apps natively, they found out that was too expensive to maintain. You're building apps, you've got different skill sets, you've got to maintain those separate apps, just a lot of work. Or they went and they built maybe hybrid apps in the early days of Cordova. Certainly there were a lot more limits, and they hit the performance challenges. They hit some of the things that Cordova did not do well. So they had apps that they would ship, but the users rejected for various reasons. So they're coming back to the table saying, hey, we want the quality of native apps. We want certain native device capabilities. Again, why would you build an app versus a PWA or a website? It's usually things like I need encrypted data storage at rest, or I need access to very specific device capabilities that perhaps the browser doesn't enable. So I know I need to build an app. How do I do this in a way that I can maintain and go cross-platform for the kind of cost of building a web app? And that's where technologies like NativeScript, like React Native, come in and fill the gap. And clearly by the usage and the continued uptick in adoption, there's a fairly good-sized audience out there who needs that solution and is coming to these technologies to get it done.
And you're still living in the App Store model, but I get the sense that these approaches are less brittle, that updates to iOS don't automatically break your app. They'll keep running.
Yeah, a lot of that's on iOS. iOS, it's in their best interest as well to not to break, all the apps in the App Store when they ship new versions. But at the point you ship an app built with NativeScript, you're shipping a native app. So just like any other native app, it's sort of bound to the same both benefits and sort of challenges of doing that approach. But for most users, they're coming for the benefits, and then we try to make the challenges as easy as possible.
Yeah, but one code base across the two primary platforms, that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and not just on the code, but also on the UI markup. And I think that's one of the key differences between something like a NativeScript and a React Native. We try to embrace a write once everywhere, run everywhere if you can, while giving you the choice to break out and do things specific. But for a lot of common kinds of app screens, you don't really need to define it twice. So if you can get away with kind of an abstract definition of a screen, it can run natively on iOS and Android with native UI. It just saves developers even more time.
And I don't see the same level of debate we used to have where iOS apps had to look like iOS apps and Android apps had to look like Android apps versus like Facebook apps look like Facebook.
Yeah, I think we had a change in that thinking maybe 2 or 3 years ago-ish, where development teams and users started to recognize that what was more important than strictly conforming to the platforms was having a well-understood app identity. So if a user was using your app on iOS today, and then they changed from iOS to Android tomorrow, that when they kept using your app, they wouldn't have to relearn the whole way your app works. And so I think that sort of shifted the thinking to saying, you know what, it's more important that our app is consistent for our users, no matter which phone or tablet they pick up, than to have strict conformance to these platform styles.
Well, and at the same time, I'm glad to hear you say the word at tablet too, because tablet in the enterprise to me, I've worked with a few folks where that's actually a very serious part of their business is they have dedicated tablets, specifically in enterprises. I don't know that it matters all that much in the consumer world, but the Barclays Blank scenario, like there's a bunch of scenarios where these are custom built enterprise class tablets and the code needs to be right for them.
And I think one thing that doesn't get talked about enough at all when we talk about mobile technologies and the way you build mobile apps, interestingly, is just the enterprise apps as a category. We're always talking about consumer apps and app stores. In the enterprise, the app stores barely matter. They have their own internal app distribution. They can use enterprise signing certificates. So the challenges there are very different than for the public app stores. And as you say, very often there are much more advanced use cases. One of the extreme use cases I'm aware of with NativeScript, for instance, and using some of the convey features, is a supply chain company which uses a mobile app. I think they moved from like custom, those custom old scanner devices that had
the handhelds.
Whatever embedded software. They moved to something Android-based with a scanner and needed to build apps that could run on all these Android devices, processing something like 50 million scans a day, right? Because they're moving supply all over the globe. So that's not going to show up in an app store, but that's a critical app that's being built for Android devices that an enterprise is trying to solve.
And worth a lot, and it's going to be around a long time. And the thing they replaced was probably a WinCE device.
Probably so, yeah. I have no doubt that's the case.
There's something to be said it's not just the consumers that when you deploy that same look and feel to all your different devices, right? You have a unique look and feel, but also your support team that has to support that application. If
Sure.
it looks and feels the same and behaves the same on all the different devices, your support team only needs to learn one app instead of
Support team,
3.
documentation, all of that
Yes!
comes into play.
Oh,
And fortunately, the platforms themselves have been converging. If you've watched kind of how Android and iOS, their own style guides have changed. Even Android now suggests more often tab navigation, very similar to what iOS has done for a while. And iOS has aped obviously some of the Android styles into their default style guides. So I think everyone is kind of converging more or less into the major pillars that are very similar, but
well, and the point of that differentiation is not a feature anymore, that people
Correct.
want consistency, reliability. You want to talk about a theme, Jeff, about our conversation today?
yeah.
Reliability, stability, consistency. Like that's an emerging force in our industry more than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
exactly
good point.
right.
The operating system is plumbing that I don't want to have to think about.
Right. And that operating system could be iOS and Android. And again, I don't want to think about it. I just want to write code, get people productive, and it works.
BlackBerry?
Yeah.
BlackBerry? Can that be a thing?
Yeah.
Can it?
I made a comparison the other day. You will laugh at
silly.
this. I called the HoloLens 2 the new BlackBerry.
Wow.
But the new BlackBerry circa 1997,
So
right?
So
That
you're predicting an eventual collapse in.
well, in 10 years, right?
10
but
years.
in 97, BlackBerry was the first real email handheld device. And it was only
Yes.
for enterprises because you had to run all the stuff on the back end of your Exchange server to make it work.
sure.
And it was when we first saw that wave of addiction, and it came in businesses first, right? That's when we started calling them crackberries, right?
Yeah.
They were on the West Wing. Like that was it was in the social gestalt, but only for a certain class of user.
Mhm.
The smartphone didn't penetrate the general population until the iPhone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've had this thought, and Todd, tell me if you've seen this also. When you go to the airport and you see somebody with that cool gadget down the way, sitting down at the end of the lounge area as you're getting ready to get on the plane, you look over, wow, that's a really cool looking laptop. Right? And all of a sudden you come back to the airport, the next month, and there's 4 of them of the exact same, whatever gadget it is. And this is what
Right.
happened with the BlackBerry, right? There were, right? You saw folks, oh, I got to do my email, and they're on their BlackBerry, right?
Yep.
And it happened with mobile phones. Oh, look at
Sure.
look at that cool iPhone they've got.
Yeah.
Until I see HoloLens or some AR device in the airport lounge like that, or maybe it's Starbucks, maybe it's the coffee shop, and there's that gadget envy. I gotta have that.
Yeah. Well, which means it's got to be compelling enough. I mean, that's what happened with smartphones. The iPhone was so good when you showed it to somebody, they walked away with it.
Sure.
Right. Like that. And I don't know if the HoloLens 2 is going to be that good. I hope it is. It's been enough years, but I'm waiting for the moment for
It's obviously
the
not
change.
just about the technology. It's about the price point. It's about the product itself. Where does it add benefit for consumers? But frankly, I think it does a disservice to the HoloLens to assign success based on what it does for consumers.
Then they're clearly targeting it at enterprise, which is why I compared it to a BlackBerry.
I think it's
like,
smart. I think that's
the
the
right
use
place.
case.
Yeah. For now,
we
and
have a lot of people
it's the way
trying
a
to do
market
that.
evolves.
Yeah, exactly right. And so we have a lot of people trying to do AR and VR, or really more AR, even with native scripts. So we have.
I was going to be the next
AR
question. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have AR plugins. We have a cross-platform plugin for NativeScript, which uses ARKit, ARCore. And we have developers working with that. We have some pretty cool projects, POCs we've seen people do. But the reality is people are still struggling for the most part to understand how to make it useful for their business. There's some great demos that have been done. The classic industrial demo of hold it in a machine, get some guidance as you go. Whatever we've seen the demos.
Yeah.
But for most development teams we encounter, they're still struggling to figure out how it makes sense for them. And even when they do, the skill set needed to develop for VR or AR is a very unique skill set, at least within the typical app dev space. It's basically game development. You need to be able to work and think in 3D space.
Yep.
And frankly, most developers have never tried to do that. So it's a new challenge.
But in 2007, when the iPhone came along, and 2008 by the jailbreak and so forth, and the move to the app stores, a lot of people had not programmed for the mobile device before. But the revolution came. The gold rush was there.
Sure.
Yeah,
So-
I don't know if I'd agree the shift was as different. I mean, that's basically just 2D programming here to 2D programming there.
Yeah. But it was different tools and it was different form factor, and we struggled with a lot
Yeah.
of things. And even that, and that was with Apple having very strong guidance.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's an interesting part of it is are we going to have the kind of guidance we needed? Apple had a very strong vision, and you may not have agreed with it on what they wanted their apps to look like, and the store was the gatekeeper to say, if you're not complying, hey, we're just not going to ship your app.
Sure. Yeah.
And so they drove a lot of developers to learn a new technique.
I think the point that you make in there, which is I think also very relevant even today, is look how long it's taking app developers to change the way they think about apps that they build to actually leverage capabilities that have been default in these devices now for a decade. Like, think first about how you use a camera. Don't make me input something into a form. I mean, the camera's been there on every phone since 2007, but it's
still
taking
hard.
us this long to think about, oh, I should use that sensor, that device first, instead of some old way of collecting information. So,
well, and here we are 10 years into the smartphone revolution, and we're still talking about the number of ways to build apps for smartphones. Like, it's fragmented for a reason. It's not easy. These new platforms continue to be hard.
Sure. Yeah, and they keep changing. There's new tech. I mean, when we talk about the kind of onslaught of new technologies developers have to learn these days, we're doing ourselves, I don't want to say we're doing ourselves no favors. You know, diversity of thought is good. Lots of new projects and technologies are generally good. But for the average developer, being able to filter out what they don't need so they can actually be productive, it's a real challenge today. Even just take the mobile app space we've been talking about here today. If you're sitting down to build a mobile app, first you have to sort out, do I go web? Do I go cross-platform native like NativeScript? Do I go Xamarin? Do I go one of these other routes? Then if you go, let's say, the NativeScript or JavaScript route, you've got to say, do I use Angular? Do I use Vue? Should I use React? I mean, there's
which
this
UI
sort of
framework?
All of these things we're forcing ourselves to learn, and we're always worried that it's going to be obsolete 3 years from now. So
certainly.
And then we toss on VR, we toss on the cloud, we toss on functions, and it's just a big tower of learning for developers these days. So it's a challenge.
I wonder if we're going to look back on this current time sort of fondly, because largely, I mean, the phone hasn't changed much since 2007. It may have got a bit bigger and added a few more cameras and a fingerprint toucher, but they've been slabs of flat glass for a long time. Sure. I think it's one of the reasons that the web development has matured as much as it had on the mobile device.
Right.
But boy, if something like an AR visor, and I'm not going to presume it's HoloLens, actually takes off, that's a big disruption to the way we write software. Like, we're going to be back in the thick of starting over on a lot of things.
Oh my
First
gosh, yes.
company that can crack a truly consumer-friendly AR visor or goggles of some kind.
Yeah.
That's fashionable, that works, it's wearable. That will no doubt be the next major disruption in how we build app UI. I would say right now the kind of in-between stage is voice. All the voice assistants and kind of the voice tap with the earbuds, things of that nature. That's kind of a here and now disruption to how we think about interactions with software, but certainly AR will be a huge leap in disruption.
Yeah, and I wonder how much AR will be voice driven too, right? Like a lot of the skills that we're maturing right now. What Jobs got right with the iPhone was he saw capacitive touch get good enough that he could put it on a phone. It was built elsewhere, but it was that combination of ingredients. And I wonder what that combination of ingredients will look like. Like, I'm excited with the HoloLens too, and admittedly we're off subject, that it's got eye tracking.
Sure.
Right? Like, that addition is kind of important, that's a great UI opportunity. Yeah. So the synthesis of the UIs into that environment is going to be really, really quite interesting.
But I agree. It's an exciting future on that front.
Science fiction has kind of driven a little bit of our industry's thought and kind of gotten us thinking and imagining in the right directions for some of these things, right? Certainly touchscreen interfaces, they conceived in the 70s and 80s in science fiction television shows. And as we look forward to that next generation of what is it? Certainly, right? Star Trek, they were talking to the computer for how long? Fine, great.
Sure.
When we think about and we're looking at that next generation, what is it in science fiction that's going on that we see today that's going to influence that next one, right? That next generation of dreamers that are going into high school right now.
I think it's Iron Man.
the flying suit.
Not even the flying suit part. It's the
Jarvis
interface, right?
UI.
The Jarvis effect. Yeah.
So the thing that always got me about that, okay, now to go off onto a Marvel tangent for a second, but it's user interface. He's looking. He has a visor full of things in front of him, but how is he actually saying, "Okay, now execute the blasters" versus flying versus whatever?
Yeah.
He's not
Predictive artificial intelligence.
There it is.
Well, or maybe it's eye gestures. I don't know, but you're right. Being able to anticipate need.
But it feels like all those pieces to Iron Man are around somewhere. The interface. Maybe it's not flying. Maybe it's not the pulsars or whatever, repulsors, whatever. But we do have all those pieces there. It amazes me that there's. I was at an event last year and they had the gaze monitoring device you can wire up to your PC, and it'll put a spot on the screen where you're looking.
Yeah.
You
start to realize how fast your eyes move.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Chase the dot around. Yeah. I mean, you raised an interesting question about what is in sci-fi today that paints the future. You know, and I do think in some ways there was a renaissance of this thinking in that 70s, 80s sort of generation of sci-fi thinking that maybe the current generation doesn't think enough in real ways about what the future should look like. I mean, we had the whole, remember, was it 10 years ago now? Is that it? The Minority Report gesture UI that everyone was kind of buzzing about. But, you know, the realities of that was like, well, you know, gorilla arms, you know, that's not comfortable. So maybe not a good idea. People, it turns out they're lazy. They wiggle their Wii joystick just to play the video games. So, you know, I don't know. I think that's a good question. And as we talk about VR, AR, let's say more specifically, and things like Iron Man, I think you do have to also ask the question of, you know, how do we make sure tech doesn't completely take over our social interactions? Even today with phones, you know, I find myself walking around with this slab in front of me way more than I think I should have it in front of me. Right. I'm in a car now. I've got a heads-up display in a car. You know, there's information coming at me from 5 different screens. You know, I think there's a question for maybe not us, or maybe we can help lead the conversation. Maybe it's the next generation to say, where do we turn technology off and say it lives here, and where do we let it just completely permeate all of our interactions?
Well, it just integrates and disappears into, you know, what you're doing. Here we are having a conversation on 3 corners of a continent.
Yeah.
Right. And it just works. Like it's seamless, it's facilitating, but it's not the focus.
That's right. That's right. And our social interaction is I'm talking to a green light on a screen here, to a box. Your voices are coming through my head, but you know, I feel like we're just right in the same room.
Close. That's it.
Right.
But there is a sense of is the technology dominating or is it facilitating?
Right. Yeah. So anyway, as you said, we're way out of the mobile app game, but mobile apps are certainly a bridge to where this future is, because it is
a sense of the path.
It is in the path. It is today, but it is definitely just a step to what's next.
I think about the mobile apps like Pokemon Go, right? That was first real widespread consumer adoption of AR.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Gaming again kind of helps lead the way on some of these things.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's what you can learn, what you can do with mobile apps is going to inspire that next generation.
Yeah, and I think if we could take anything from this and bring it back all around to the topic, I think that the key is we know it's going to keep changing. Yeah, and there's going to be new platforms, there's going to be new things, and you're going to be asked as developers to keep up with them as they come. And so I think as a development strategy point of view, why am I doing a workshop called Conquering Mobile with JavaScript? Because if you learn this skill set and the things that go with it, you have a lot of different tools very quickly at your disposal because you have a common skill set that helps you keep up with this change, whether it's via PWAs and hitting things broadly through the browser or cross-platform technologies like native scripts. You know, you're prepared for what's next because the platform is kind of helping you keep up with the different surface areas without requiring you to go learn something new each time. So I think that's why developers have to think forward to anticipate this change and build a skill set that's going to keep them ready for whatever's next, whether it's AR or something else.
Yeah, JavaScript's not going anywhere.
It is not. If you don't like it, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
learn to like
it is what it is.
It is there.
Google's tried for a while.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah.
Well, guys, are we wrapping up?
I think it's that time. Yeah.
I just as a little aside, I did find that eagle clip. If you want to see it. I did find it. So
Todd, do you want to see this? There's an eagle that Richard has that's been floundering around in his in his pond there.
Okay. I see the clip here. This is.
Hang on. Let's switch to this. There we go.
I
stop sharing your screen.
Sorry, I'll turn it back on.
There we go.
Have you got it?
Yeah, there we go.
All right, because you got to catch the beginning's important.
Okay.
So that's the pond. There you go, right over the camera.
Nice.
And I'm like, what is an eagle doing in my pond? This is odd. Like, why would an eagle just sort of hang out in the pond? And the pond, of course, is fresh water. The water you see adjacent, that's all salt water.
Mhm.
And so my guess is that the eagle had been fishing, and every so often they mess up and they crash into the ocean.
Yeah.
And then they sort of paddle ashore and dry off.
Yeah.
And then they get salty. Right?
Nice.
They've got salt all over them. They may not like it very much. And so, yeah, he's bird bathing. It's an eagle bird bathing in my pond.
It's a very luxury bird bath that you've
There you go. It's a
provided
big,
there.
well, it's a big bird, needs a big bird bath.
Is that a bald eagle? I
It's a bald eagle, yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
Oh man, that's
How American. of
That's
you,
impressive.
Providing
Yeah.
baths to our birds.
There you go. We have it's sort of the largest body of fresh water in the area where we are, and that's
That's cool.
it's
Nice use of
that's
an
the thing. SPAM. It's about a 10-minute clip. He swims around, he paddles around, rinses the water through his feathers, and then eventually he flies off.
Takes
towards
off.
the boat.
Takes off, rips the camera down.
That's it. No, he almost looks like he's looking right at the camera too. But
I see you.
There you go. That's my eagle video.
Very nice.
There we go.
Well produced.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Todd. And we'll look forward to seeing you in June at the Walt Disney World Swan for
I look
Dev
forward to
Intersection.
being there.
Yeah, it was a great time.
Oh my gosh. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And we'll catch you later. We'll see you then, Todd.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Have a good day.
And we're out. All right.
All
So
right.
it's just you and I, Richard.
Oh, buddy, that's all my good clips.
That's all your
You got
good
my
clips.
eagle clip. Yeah.
I don't have any good Twitch clips of me.
I'll throw up a sea lion clip or something if you want sometime.
Sea
But
lions.
Next time, yeah, the flippin' sea lions moved in, but only briefly. They came through. So.
Okay, I don't have that kind of problem in the middle of the Philadelphia suburbs here. Dear
Oh,
Lord.
Yeah, there was a big storm on the coast, and I think it buried one of their favorite pullouts, and so they were scouting for pullouts. They scouted my boathouse. They ultimately pulled out about I don't know 50 miles further north on a beach, but the locals were very unhappy. Sea lions are obnoxious, man. Like, they smell, they're rackety, and yeah.
I bet they do. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they do.
Well, thank you everybody out there for watching and joining us today for another virtual Dev Intersection. This has been tremendous. We have these great conversations every couple weeks. We've got another one scheduled for about 2-3 weeks out.
Yeah, last Friday in April.
Yeah, last Friday in April. Oh my gosh, and we're being rated right now by our friends from Brian Clark's stream.
Oh my goodness.
38
Yes,
friends
inside.
joining us. Clark IO raid. Thank you very much, Raiders, for coming over.
Yeah. Thanks for
Hello,
coming in.
hello. We're actually in the middle of wrapping up.
Yeah, we're in the middle. I'll give you back the eagle clip. It's still running in the
It is?
background.
All right, here we can go back to
There you
that.
go.
So
While
welcome
you're all coming in, hey, we're having eagle.
welcome to Nature Talk with Jeff and Richard. Thanks
Yep.
so much. There's a eagle in the middle of the pond there. I see.
Yep.
There's Atomic Jay. Hey Jay, good to see you. And I thought I saw Brian Clark was joining us.
Awesome.
Michael Jolly's here. Hello, hello. Welcome, friends. Yes. We interviewed a couple folks. We talked about a bit about C# 8 and the new features coming to languages in the .NET ecosystem. And I really enjoyed that talk with Todd where we discussed not just eagles in the pond here,
Ponds. Yeah.
but the future of mobile applications and how it kind of inspires and influences the next generation of devices and the direction that we're going here with our technology.
Yeah, without a doubt. You mentioned that whole science fiction informing thing, and the guys from Motorola that built those first cell phones, they literally said we were trying to build Starship communicators, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what that it did motivate them. It's not a crazy thing to say, right? That this does inspire. I do those geek out talks as well, and often I say, like, you have to resist science fiction because science fiction makes stuff look way easier than it actually is.
Yeah.
Space flight is easier, and the Jarvis holograms and things that Iron Man has. The reality is never going to measure up to that, but it'll get better. It'll definitely be important. And I thought it tied in very nicely with the fact that we have a fragmented mobile development market for a reason. It's complicated and it's challenging.
Yeah.
People have different skills. There's not one right way to solve this problem, and I don't know that it's ever going to be.
And that complication and fragmented environment in mobile is even worse when you start getting into AR and VR, where folks don't understand it yet.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're still really at the beginning of it. Like we haven't seen the killer app for VR or AR. I mean, we've barely seen AR products at all.
Yeah.
You know, I think about a few important VR products. Like I was very inspired by using VR to allow people that are getting over spinal injuries to start learning to use their legs. You know, that's an amazing
The eagle's
thing.
diving. Oh my gosh, look at him.
Oh
go.
yeah, he jumped back into the water again just as you cut
Just
away.
as I cut away. Oh.
Yep.
Oh,
I'm
my
telling
gosh.
you, it's a 10-minute clip of an eagle basically being an idiot, right? Like, you think they're dignified birds, and they really aren't. They're just large.
They're just large and dopey.
Yeah.
Skull Crusher for Life in the chat room says, glad we just rated. Even at the end, didn't know this channel was up and running as a separate channel from Visual Studio.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this isn't a Microsoft channel. This is
Not at all.
This is very much a channel run by the DEVintersection conference. I happen to be lucky enough to co-host.
Yeah, and have been working with us on DEVintersection pretty much since the beginning too. So
Pretty
I
close.
always appreciate your help, Jeff.
Oh, thank you very much.
uh,
It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the show. It's a great group of folks that attendees show up there. Great sponsors that really help make the event happen. And this is more of a community focus on technology. It's not just Microsoft. Yeah, there's some Microsoft influence,
Sure. But in the end, you know, I think the folks that come to DEVintersection are really focused on building software successfully, right? They work for businesses where software is an important ingredient, and no one vendor dominates anything. It's a group of people, a group of technologies working together. And so, you know, one of our major sponsors in the fall show was Intel.
Yes,
You know, they're
how about
talking about
that?
their AI products, right? Like it is a larger community, and we are all trying to make our way through solving these challenging problems. And certainly, I come from a Microsoft background as well, and I care about those technologies. I think they're pretty sure they bought this house, and so yeah, of course we're gonna talk about that, but not at the exclusion of anything else.
Certainly. Well, I think that's a show.
Yeah, it's a show. We can go out on the eagle side of things, and yeah, I'm telling you, that bird's washing himself. That's what he's doing. I think he's just desalting his feathers.
Just desalinating. That's the thing there.
But you can see in the background that rooftop. That's the boathouse. That's where we saw the otters earlier.
Yeah,
So
make sure you check out the otters. Go back and check the video on demand on this, friends.
And you can see the otters.
You can see the
So
otters.
we sit on the deck there and we watch these eagles fish in the ocean. And this is, I think, one of the ones that screwed up and hit the ocean. And so he's just trying to clean himself up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Silly. All right.
Alrighty. I'll catch you later. Thanks so much for joining us out there. This has been another Virtual DEVintersection. Take care.
See you again.